Alrighty, so we're going to be continuing on here shortly with where we left off from last time. So, been reading this book for the past few days, working my way through it, and getting to know a little deeper into the life of this man. And it's been definitely interesting looking into what he's been up to and his shenanigans and schemes and problems and his triumphs and inventions and all these different things. So it's been pretty neat so far. So it's and I'm glad I found this book, or I mean this book more or less kind of found me. So it's kind of neat, and it's neat to get through it, and we'll finally get to a close maybe this evening or maybe tomorrow. We'll see how far we get and whatnot. So should be interesting. Anyways, we'll see what chapter we're at now. Just find my. There we go. All right, we're at the Nobel Prize. And like I've been saying, if you're just watching for the first time and want to catch up, you can check out all the other chapters that I've read from the beginning on my YouTube. So just check it out. There's a link in my bio or whatever. So just have a look if that's something that interests you. So, the Nobel Prize. This is a quote from Tesla now speaking. I have concluded that the honor has been conferred upon me in acknowledgement of a discovery announced a short time ago, which concerns the transmission of electrical energy without wires. He's all about that wireless transmission. So, this discovery means that electrical effects of unlimited intensity and power can be produced, so that not only can energy be transmitted for all practical purposes to any terrestrial distance, but even effects of cosmic magnitude may be created. And that was a quote from Tesla there. So, anyways, moving on. On the 6th of November, 1915, the New York Times announced that Tesla and Edison had been awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. The source of the story, apparently, was the Copenhagen correspondent of the Daily Telegraph. Tesla had received no notification, but when interviewed by the Times, he said that he had thought that he had been given the Nobel Prize for a device he filed a patent for a month earlier that made it practical to project a human voice not only for a distance of 5,000 miles, but clear across the globe. I demonstrated this in Colorado in 1899. He went on to explain how it would work. The plant would simply be connected with the telephone exchange of New York City, and a subscriber will be able to talk to any other telephone subscriber in the world. And all this without any change in his apparatus. This plan has been called my world system. By the same means, I propose also to transmit pictures and project images so that the subscriber will not only hear the voice, but see the person to whom he's talking. So he's talking about FaceTiming. That's pretty neat. So and a lot of people propose that potentially that we've had technology for a really long time. So maybe the things that we have today are really not that special or new. And if he's thinking about this sort of thing then, and the amount of time that's passed since that, so I'm sure there's some ideas out there or some inventions from the past where they were actually capable of doing this, and they just kind of. I like the idea that they potentially suppress that sort of thing, and we think we're all awesome now, but really we're just playing around with old tech that they're giving us, and they're like light years ahead of us in terms of what they actually have and use. So it's definitely something interesting to think about. So where was I? All right, FaceTiming. So a further advantage would be that the transmission is instant and free of the unavoidable delay experienced with the use of wires and cables. As I have already made known, the current passes through the Earth, starting from the transmission station with infinite speed, slowing down to the speed of light at a distance of 6,000 miles, then increasing in speed from that region and reaching the receiving station again with infinite velocity. It's all a wonderful thing. Wireless is coming to mankind in its full meaning like a hurricane, some of these days. Someday there will be, say, 6 great wireless telephone stations in a world system, connecting all the inhabitants of this earth to one another, not only by voice, but by sight. It's surely coming. So either he's a fortune teller, he knew what was already around, or like he designed it, or whatever the case may be. But there's definitely something about that, something to think about. So, continue on. Illuminating the sky. Excuse me. This discovery had a direct bearing on the problem uppermost in the public's mind, he said, the perfection of wireless telephony. On the 7th of November, he told the Times, "We will deprive the ocean of its terrors by illuminating the sky, thus avoiding collisions at sea and other disasters caused by darkness. We will draw unlimited quantities of water from the oceans and irrigate the deserts and other arid regions. In this way, we will fertilize the soil and derive any amount of power from the sun. I also believe that ultimately all battles, if they should come, will be waged by electrical waves instead of explosives." He would say nothing further on the matter, however. He agreed that Edison deserved a dozen Nobel Prizes, though he said he had no idea which one he had been awarded the prize for. When shown the dispatch, Edison wisely declined to comment. Meanwhile, the idea of winning the prize had gone to Tesla's head. Yeah. He wrote to the Johnsons, "In 1,000 years there will be many recipients of the Nobel Prize, but I have not less than 4 dozen of my creations identified with my name in the technical literature. These are honors real and permanent, which are bestowed not by a few are apt to err, but by the whole world, which seldom makes a mistake. And for any of these, I would give all the Nobel Prizes during the next 1,000 years. Josie will never had the chance of turning me away as a beggar, but I shall give her soon the opportunity of slamming your door in the face of a millionaire." It's been turned down a few times. That's funny. So, it doesn't surprise me at this point in the story. Just the way his like history. It's like this funny like drama comedy movie. It's been really funny reading about his life so far. So, this was no joke to Robert Johnson, who had fallen on hard times. He wrote later, "When that Nobel Prize comes, remember that I'm holding on to my house by the skin of my teeth and desperately in need of cash." As it was, neither Tesla nor Edison was awarded the prize. That year, the Nobel Prize for Physics went to William Bragg and his son Lawrence for their research into crystalline structures using X-rays. Tesla had not even been nominated, though Edison was. Tesla, it's funny actually. In the beginning, when they're talking about their interactions, it was like Tesla was actually a fanboy of Edison. He was like super excited to be around him, and like they were like Edison wasn't really like nice to him. It was like he almost Tesla had like this man crush on him. It was really funny and cute just to hear the story and just how it changed, and like he screwed him over so many times, and like oh yeah, it's just this like weird exchange between these two people. It feels fake, but anyways, that's just how I feel about that situation. Anyways, carry on. So, however, Tesla's longstanding friend and first biographer John O'Neill said that Tesla actually turned down the award. To have the award go first to Marconi and then to be asked to share the award with Edison was too great a derogation of the relative value of his work and to the world for Tesla to bear without rebelling. He wrote in the Prodigal Genius, according to O'Neill, Tesla did not put himself in the same category as Edison. He considered himself a discoverer of new principles, while Edison was an inventor who exploited new discoveries for commercial gain. How about that? What do you guys think about that? Like, it's pretty funny. Like, Tesla's a character, guys. Like, just like a very degenerate lifestyle and just like doing all sorts of shady things, and it's just funny all these different stories over time about him, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows and him trying to save the world or whatever narrative that's being ran about him. It's funny because like he had like a really big ego, and he was really obsessed with like being the first and having his name out there and all this different stuff about him. It's just funny. And then there's other times where it's like, yeah, he didn't care about patents, and he just wanted to do the right thing for humanity and provide wireless like free power. And this, it's just funny the different narratives that are like written or woven in terms of him and his life and what he was about. And it's interesting to look at it from a different perspective and kind of just like pick apart his life and some of the instances, and like to it's funny, it's neat. Anyways, the next section is titled "The Bolts of Thor." Although the New York Times had announced that the Braggs had won the Nobel Prize on the 14th of November 1915, it continued to say that Tesla was a 1915 Nobel Prize winner in an article on the 8th of December, headlined, "Tesla's new device like bolts of Thor." When the paper reported that he was taking out a patent on a manless airship, it had neither an engine nor wings, and could be sent at a speed of 300 miles a second to any place on the globe using electricity. According to the Times, 10 miles or 1,000 miles, it would all be the same to the machine, the inventor says. Straight to the point. On land or on sea, it will be able to go with precision, delivering a blow that will paralyze or kill as is desired. A man in a tower on Long Island could shield New York against ships or army by working a lever. Tesla refused to go into further details. However, he dismissed electrical engineer Charles H. Harris's suggestion that in time of war, the country would be surrounded by an electrical wall of fire. So is it something like some sort of like force field or an electrical wall of fire? Interesting. As not practical, as it would take more than all the generators in the U.S. to power it. How's what work, buddy? The electrical wall of fire. Yeah, I'm curious about that one too. Maybe it's more like it's like a illusion, like it's not actually good, this actual wall of fire. Maybe I'm curious. I'm sure there's all kinds of things we don't know about that he's doing on the side, and I'm sure not every experiment that he ever did and everything that's happened we're told about. Just like I still think he probably went through more lab assistance than history will ever tell us about. Like my running joke the past few nights has been. That Tesla probably had like an ongoing ad, like people pay for like a week or a few days in the paper. Like he paid for the year, so just always asking for new assistant. Anyways, I'm just joking, but you never know, right? Anything's possible. Like I'm sure, because like these guys, they were hardcore. Like they were like hurting puppies and kittens to like prove a point, and like other animals, and like doing all sorts of tests and weird things and weird experiments. So like I wouldn't put it past them. Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of mentioned and so little detail, but like that's what we get though. Like they're not going to tell us everything, and we kind of have to deduce some things for ourselves, and we can come to our own conclusions. I mean, it's not hard to tell sometimes as to what's going on in the situation. You go through enough experiences in your life, you see a pattern. It's like, oh, you see all these things, and enough of those come together to make a certain situation. So obviously, we can perceive that this is what probably happened based on the information that we're given. You know what I mean? So anyhow, uh, describing radar. While Tesla's ideas on unmanned airships, so dirigibles, airships like the Zeppelin, all these different things, like that's another topic that I've been kind of getting into a little bit too, because I find it fascinating in terms of the possibility that they've actually had dirigibles, airships, like all these different things for a lot longer than we're told, and that's probably how a lot of the map making was done, and any type of like cartography or whatever. It just it's interesting to think about, and wars were waged that way from the air, and who knows what type of weaponry they would have had, and things that were able, and like from the sounds of it, he potentially could have had like an army of airships, all like drones, like remote controlled, and because he was able to do all these things. So, and if he could probably send a radio signal for, or like a signal for a drone or whatever the case may be, from one side of the world to the other. And I think at this point anything would have been possible based on the information that we're given. And I mean, it seems like accurate information. Some of the way things that they describe, these devices, these generators, these inventions, these remote control devices, the automatons, robots, all these different things that we've been going through the past few nights, as far as all these different inventions and things that he's been capable of doing, and the sending power wirelessly at distance. And we haven't quite gotten into the ether too much yet, and that's something that I'm curious about too, because at the end of the day, as far as we all know, Tesla is that he said that it was possible to have free energy from the ether, and that can be harvested. So that's something I am curious more about. So if you're harvesting it and sending it are different things. So yes, he could send the power wirelessly, but the understanding of like not even using hydroelectricity or anything else, the pure harvesting of the ether, the electricity from the ether, or whatever the case may be. That's the biggest thing for me trying to understand, because I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. There's a lot of other ideas and other things that really really make sense to me. So, but anyways, carry on. The airships. His idea was to transmit high frequency radio waves that would deflect off the hulls of vessels and appear on a fluorescent screen. In 1917, he said, "We may produce at will from a sending station an electrical effect in any particular region of the globe. We may determine the relative position of course of a moving object, such as a vessel at sea, the distance traversed by the same or its speed." This was one of the first descriptions of what we now call radar. Again, it was too far ahead of its time to be taken seriously. However, see, like they always say, he's created all these stuff. He just never either bothered to patent it or do something about it, and this, that, and the next thing. So there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, everyone stole his inventions and everything else. But sometimes, a lot of times, technically, they really didn't, because patents lapse. He doesn't get a new one, or he just never bothered doing it. So that's on him. That's not like some plot against him. He was quite a bit of a fuck up. Like, from all the stories I've been telling you guys, and from what I've been reading from this book specifically, just about all the things, all the trouble he was getting to, all the shisty maneuvers, and even him, he would say it was always a scheme. What's the next scheme? Like, him and Mark Twain were like drinking buddies, like talking about scheming like old rich ladies with like health products and stuff, like probably doing like pyramid schemes together. Like. And it's really funny. So now, with knowing all this information and the kinds of things, and the fact that we think that he murdered his brother, no one ever talks about Dane Tesla. Dane. So I made a funny video about it. Anyways, sure. Anyway, so yeah, he's like this schemer, and he's like, I just have this really different look about him. So when I read all these different things as I'm going, I have this whole different perspective about who this man was and what he was really about. And like, I do have a lot of questions as to his real involvement. How much of it is it true that he was actually inventing, or was he reverse engineering? Was he really even a scientist, or was he just a puppet or a figurehead that they were able to use? I have a lot of different ideas, and my imagination leads me to believe all sorts of different things, and based on the information, both things are plausible. So I don't, until I find out a little more, I can't really make a perfect decision on that one. But I'm definitely split on how I feel about him. So, where was I? Yeah, he was one of the first descriptions of radar, and yeah, he didn't bother with it. So someone in 1934, the French engineer Emile Girardot built an optical locating radio apparatus, conceived according to the principles stated by Tesla, he said, and obtained a patent for a working system, part of which was installed on the liner the Normandy in 1935. Before I continue on the next section, there's this one we can take a look at. It's like this weird... What is it we got going on here? It's Thomas A. Edison and the Edison Metallists. It's like Edison and his crew is like homies. This is yeah, it's funny. The Edison Medal was created in 1904 by a group of Edison's friends and associates, of course, as an annual award to be given to a living electrician for meritorious achievement in electrical science and art. In 1909, the American Institute of Electrical Engineers agreed to present it as their highest award. The first recipient was Tesla's rival, Elihai, I can't even say that name, someone with the last name Thompson. George Westinghouse and Alexander Graham Bell also received the award. The medal is now presented by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, formed when the AIEE merged with the Institute of Radio Engineers. Yeah, so this is like, it's funny. They all got like this like kind of look. They got an interesting look to them. All these characters like involved in the game, like the electrical gangsters of the 1800s. Like, look at these motherfuckers. Some of them, like, they take real funny pictures. I don't know. It's just funny to look at, because all the shady shit that I know they were up to now, and I mean, most of us already have a mistrust for corporations and such, So to see these guys and their smug looking fucking faces and all the shit that we know they were up to, and like I said, they were hurting puppies and kittens and talking shit about each other, making everybody look bad in the news, and stealing each other's ideas, robbing each other, making everybody look bad. Like, they're doing all kinds of fucking shady shit to each other. Even Tesla was into some shit, no doubt. And it's just, isn't it? You look at these characters. It's really funny, right? So, I don't know. It's just I have a really new, after reading this, especially after reading this book, I just have this whole new outlook on all these historical figures and what they were really all about. And yeah, they were like some terrible dudes. It's like the electrical mafia right here. Anyways, excuse me. Carrying on. The Edison Medal. In 1917, Tesla was awarded the Edison Medal by the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. According to O'Neill, Tesla was reluctant to accept it at first, but was persuaded to do so by the chairman of the medal committee. Bernard A. Barrand, who was an admirer and close personal friend. Tesla turned the metal down initially because it was nearly 30 years since he announced his rotating electrical field and his AC systems to the Institute. I do not need its honors, and someone else may find it useful, he said. Pressed by Barrand for further explanation, Tesla said, "You propose to honor me with a medal which I could pin on my coat and strut for a vain hour before the members and guests of your institute. You would bestow an outward semblance of honoring me, but you would decorate my body and continue to let it starve. For failure to supply recognition, my mind and its creative products will have supplied the foundation upon which the major portion of your institute exists. And when you go through the vacuous pantomime of honoring Tesla, you would not be honoring Tesla, but Edison, who had previously shared unearned glory from every previous recipient of this medal." How about that? Despite his rancor, Tesla was cajoled. I don't even know what that word means. Maybe someone could tell me, or maybe I'm mispronouncing it. It's like CAJOLED. It's not a word that I don't think I've ever read in my entire life. But anyway, so into accepting the medal. After all, it could hardly be awarded to Edison, but the acceptance speech presented Tesla was something of a problem. When he had addressed the AIEE in 1888, he had a lab where he could prepare his demonstrations. Now he had none. Nor could he expect to equal the lectures he had taken on the road in the 1890s. He had no props either. After a private dinner at the Engineers Club, the medal winner was to give a formal address in the auditorium of the United Engineering Society's building. However, as the members of the Institute assembled there, Tesla was nowhere to be seen. Yeah, dipping out as per usual. This doesn't surprise me. Not showing up, not paying his bills, running away from landlords, owing money to different people, on the run most likely. Funny guy. Anyway, so Barron found him feeding the pigeons in the plaza of New York Public Library. As he approached, Tesla had pigeons perched on his head, shoulders, and arms, and he's like Mike Tyson, and he had a carpet of them pecking at seed around his feet. It was clear that the pigeons meant more to him than the members of the AIEE. Barron begged Tesla not to let him down. All right, so there's a quick little section about that gentleman that we were just talking about before we carry on to the next section. So he was born 1875, lived until 1932. Born in Villeneuve, Switzerland, he had studied engineering in Berlin before emigrating to the U.S. in 1894. He was one of the first to understand Tesla's work with alternating currents and began publishing articles on the applications of alternating current in 1896. His treatise, The Induction Motor, was published by Electrical World and Engineer in 1901. It was expanded and published as a book. The induction motor and other alternating current motors in 1921. Barron met Tesla in 1901 when he was assigned to design a motor for Wardenclyffe. And Barron, Tesla found a like-minded person, yeah. So Barron was the inventor of numerous electrical devices and took out over 70 patents. After a period of ill health, he committed suicide at his home in Massachusetts. It's one of those moments where I do my air quotations that you don't necessarily see and say he committed suicide. Yes. So interesting. I'm curious about that. Maybe something will come up. Sometimes, like, we go a little bit ahead and we start looking at something, and then we get our answer further into the chapter. So I'm not sure, but we will see what Bernard A. See, some people, like, some of those seem like fake names to me. I don't know, like, just the way that it looks and the way that I see that, to me, that just there's something seems off about it. And a lot of the times when I see these, like, historical people's names from the past, it just, some of them seem really silly. And yeah, like I said, sometimes I feel like I'm reading a script when I'm looking at these, like, historical information or these old stories or whatever the case may be. All right, so carrying on. The Wheels of Industry Will Cease is the title of the next section. In the auditorium of the United Engineering Society's building, Barron said that Tesla had been taken temporarily unwell, but he was now okay and the proceedings would be delayed by about 20 minutes. When the presentation began, Dr. Arthur Kennelly from the Edison Company said that Tesla was being awarded the Edison Medal for the development of rotating magnetic fields, which had made it possible to use AC in electric motors, and for his investigations into high-frequency currents. Charles A. Terry, who had worked with Tesla on some of his early research, ran through Tesla's achievements to date, followed up by pointing out that by an extraordinary coincidence, Tesla had given the first lecture on polyphase AC there exactly 29 years earlier. Synchronicity. Interesting. So, adding. Not since the appearance of Faraday's experimental researches in electricity has a great experiment truth been voiced so simply and so clearly as this description of Mr. Tesla's great discovery of the generation and utilization of polyphase alternating currents. He left nothing to be done for those who followed him. His paper contained the skeleton even of the mathematical theory. 3 years later, in 1891, there was given the first great demonstration by Swiss engineers of the transmission of power at 30,000 volts from Laufen to Frankfurt by means of Mr. Tesla's system. A few years later, this was followed by the development of the Cataract Construction Company under the under the presidency of our member Edward D. Adams, and with the aid of engineers of the Westinghouse Company. It is interesting to recall here tonight that in Lord Kelvin's report to Mr. Adams, Lord Kelvin recommended the use of direct current for the development of power at Niagara Falls and for its transmission to Buffalo. The due appreciation, or even enumeration, of the results of Mr. Tesla's invention is neither practical nor desirable at this moment. Yeah, everyone's fucking shitting on this guy. It's hilarious. There is a time for all things. Suffice it is to say that were we to seize and to eliminate from our industrial world the results of Mr. Tesla's work, the wheels of industry would cease to work. The wheels, they would cease to turn. Our electric cars and trains would stop. Our towns would be dark. Our mills would be dead and idle. Yes, so far-reaching is this work that has become the warp and woof of industry. What a weird way to speak. It's just sometimes I have a hard time reading this stuff, and it's like in this weird like cursive writing. So that's why sometimes I have a hard time with it. It's a smaller font as well, but it's just the way people were speaking in this time is so funny. His name marks an epoch in the advance of electrical science. From that work has sprung a revolution in the electrical art. So Baron then asked Tesla to accept the medal, not for the purpose of perpetuating his name. The name of Tesla runs no more risk of oblivion than does that of Faraday or that of Edison. Nor was the medal evidence that Tesla's work had received official sanction. His work stands in no need of such sanction. No, Mr. Tesla, we beg you to cherish this medal as a symbol of our gratitude for the new creative thought, the powerful impetus akin to revolution, which you have given to our art and to our science. You have lived to see the work of your genius established. What shall a man desire more than this? There rings out to us a paraphrase of Pope's lines on Newton. Nature and nature's laws lay hid in the night. God said, let Tesla be, and all was light. Fuck. That's funny. Okay, so next little section we got here. Tesla's acceptance speech. So he's this is all about that stupid Edison medal. So accepting the Edison medal, Tesla said he was grateful for the sympathy and appreciation shown him. Great strides have been made in the transmission and transformation of energy, he said, but we are pressing on, inspired with the hope and conviction that this is just the beginning, a forerunner of further and still greater accomplishments. He had not written an acceptance speech and spoke off the cuff, saying, excuse me, I come from a very wiry and long-lived race. Some of my ancestors have been centenarians, and one of them lived 100. Oh, so they've like lived to 100 and longer. Interesting. And one of them lived 129 years. I am determined to keep up the record and believe there is a prospect of accomplishing it. Then nature has given me a vivid imagination, which through incessant exercise and training, through the study of scientific objects and the verification of theories through experiment, has become very accurate in results, so that I have been able to dispense, to a large extent, with the slow labors, wasteful and expensive process of practical development of the ideas I conceive. It has been made possible for me to explore extended fields with great rapidity and get results with the least expenditure of vital energy. By this means, I may tell you also, I am able to picture the objects of my desires in forms so real and tangible that I can rid myself of that morbid craving. Yeah, I mean, if you can see it, you can believe it, and vice versa. If you believe it, you can see it, and it's kind of manifestations of the mind. It's interesting, but yeah. So that I can rid myself of the morbid craving for perishable possessions to which so many succumb. My life was also wonderful in another respect, for physical endurance or energy. If you inquire into the career of unsuccessful men in the inventor's profession, you will find, as a rule, that they are as remarkable for their physical as for their mental capacities. When I turned my thought to inventions, I found that I could visualize my conceptions with the greatest facility. I did not need any models and drawings or experiments. I could do it all in my mind, and I did. The way I unconsciously evolved what I considered a new method in materializing inventive concepts and ideas is exactly opposed to the purely experimental method, of which undoubtedly Edison is the greatest and most successful exponent. The moment you construct a device to carry into practice a crude idea, you will find that you will be engrossed with the details and effects of the apparatus. As you go on changing and constructing, you will lose the forces of concentration and you will lose sight of the great underlying principle. You obtain results, but at the sacrifice of quality. I did not construct. When I got an idea, I started right away to build it up in my mind. I changed the structure, I made improvements, I experimented, and I ran the device in my mind. He's like running simulations in his head, and he could like, interesting, interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. So, anyways, continue. It is absolutely the same to me whether I place my turbine in my mind or have it in my shop actually running in my test. It makes no difference. The results are the same. In this way, you see, I can develop and perfect an invention without touching anything. And when I have gone so far that I've put into that device every possible improvement I can think of, that I can see no fault in it anymore, I then construct it. And every time my device works as I conceived it would. My experiment comes out exactly as I plan it. And in 20 years, there has not been a single solitary experiment which did not come out exactly as I thought it would. How about that? What do you guys think about that? It's pretty cool. Before we continue on, I'm just going to take a little break here for a second. What's the next little thing we got here? Destroying the dream. So this is Tesla speaking here. I have received reports which have completely confounded me, all the more as I am now doing important work for the government, with a view of putting the plant to a special moment. I trust that you will appreciate the seriousness of the situation, and we'll see that the property is taken good care of and that all apparatus is carefully preserved. So, Tesla, the character. What do you guys think? How do you feel about that? Is he the man, the myth, the legend that everyone thinks he is? Is it more some? I've heard some really interesting things over the years about this guy, so it's funny to hear everyone's perspectives and opinions on how they feel about the man. So just give me a minute before I carry on, and then I'll try to answer any questions if you have any in the comments, and if not, I will carry on very shortly. Yeah, so there's a few chapters left. We're getting there, but we'll see what happens. So, Tesla had signed over Wardenclyffe to the Waldorf Astoria. Oh, yeah. The moment I read that, I was like, okay, yeah, finally. He didn't pay his rent for like 3 years or whatever, so, yeah. Had to do something, so he could not pay his hotel bill, which had now reached $20,000. That's like 400 grand. That's a $400,000 at today's prices, it says. So, however, he still hoped it would be returned when he raised the money to pay the bill. But the hotel management was determined to demolish the tower and sell off the parts. Tesla's response was to emphasize the tower's usefulness in the event of war. It was, after all, home to his death ray and could shatter armies with its bolts of Thor. Nevertheless, he was told that the demolition of the tower was to go ahead. With the U.S. now in World War I, there would be no more money. As a part of the war effort, Westinghouse, American Marconi, and AT&T were allowed to pool their patents and produce each other's equipment without compensating the original inventors. Wow. A great wrong has been done, he wrote later, but I'm confident that Justice will prevail. In July 1917, Tesla left Waldorf Astoria, where he lived for 20 years. After persuading the management to let him keep many of his personal effects in the basement, he took the train to Chicago, where he planned to continue work on his bladeless turbines. There he moved into the Blackstone Hotel next door to the University of Chicago. The following month, he received a letter from George Scherf, his secretary, telling him that explosives experts had placed charges on the major struts of the tower at Wardenclyffe and had blown them up. The title of the next section: Suspicions of Espionage. There's a lot of that going on, especially of the corporate variety. And that's some other interesting things that we've read so far, too. Just these guys were shady as fuck, and it's just, the more and more we look at it, the more we find out. And yeah. Moving along. So, meanwhile, the story was circulated that suspected German spies had been using the tower for radio communications. The electrical experimenter said, suspecting that German spies were using the big wireless tower erected at Shoreham, Long Island, about 20 years ago by Nikola Tesla, the federal government ordered the tower destroyed. It was recently demolished with dynamite. During the past month, several strangers had been seen lurking about the place. And the New York Sun gleefully reported, the destruction of Nikola Tesla's famous tower shows forcibly the great precautions being taken at this time to prevent any news of military importance getting to the enemy. Tesla was upset by the implication, I mean, why wouldn't he be, that he was disloyal to his new country. He had argued that the structure should have been preserved to help locate and destroy enemy submarines. If the tower had been destroyed to curb spying, Tesla pointed out that he should have been compensated by the government for the large amount of money he put into it. As it was, he made no public protest when the U.S. was at war. However, 2 years later, he wrote that his dream had been destroyed by rivals, saying, I am unwilling to accord to some small-minded and jealous individuals the satisfaction of having thwarted my efforts. These men, to me, are nothing more than microbes of a nasty disease. Jeez. My project was retarded by the laws of nature. The world was not prepared for it, obviously. It was too far ahead of its time. But the same laws will prevail in the end and make it a triumphal success. Telephony takes over. So, with Tesla's World Telegraphy Center now in pieces, representatives of American, Marconi, AT&T, Westinghouse, and General Electric got together behind closed doors in Washington and formed RCA. That sounds like a conspiracy. Shit, they have all little bits and pieces of all his stuff that they stole and used over time, and they're coming together to create the super mega corporation that is RCA. And think of all the technologies they have, and they're involved in a lot of our televisions, and especially back in the day too. So, are you watching TV, or is TV watching you? And how much technology have they been using and putting into your home for however many years? It's kind of interesting to think about, because an AT&T, they probably been listening and looking into people's homes for ever since TVs have been brought into the mainstream, and it's kind of interesting to think about. Or not, or scary, I don't know, it depends what you think. So, they came together and formed RCA. At the end of the war, radio stations were returned to their rightful owners, favoring RCA. Using Marconi patents, Westinghouse set up independently. In 1920, Tesla wrote, offering his services. They were refused. However, a little later, Westinghouse wrote again, asking Tesla if he would like to broadcast to their invisible audience one Thursday evening. Tesla replied that 20 years earlier, he had promised his friend J.P. Morgan. He was friends with J.P. Morgan? Well, that's interesting to see, because if you guys think about it, think about all the shit that we know now about J.P. Morgan. He's like if you were to look at video game bosses, he would have been one of those badasses from the past that was a problem and whatever. And it's just one of those characters in the game that was bad and causing a lot of problems for everyone. And it's just interesting that he would have been friends with him. But is it interesting, though, considering what we know now about Tesla? So, they say you should, people judge you for the people that you spend your time with, right? Who you hang around with. It shows a lot. It shows a lot about your character. Who your friends are shows kind of who you are, right? So, if Tesla's hanging around with these types of people like J.P. Morgan, right? Makes you wonder. So, Where was I? So, right, he was friends with J.P. Morgan, and it was talking about his world system that would enable the voice of a telephone subscriber to be transmitted to any point on the globe. He was also basically talking about FaceTiming, so voice and picture. So I prefer to wait until my project is completed before addressing an invisible audience, he said proudly. So the next section, the science fantasy factor. Though Tesla's tower was in ruins, the idea would live on. It still lives on even today, actually. So, before leaving, before leaving New York, Tesla teamed up with long-term admirer Hugo Gernsback, the editor of Electrical Experimenter. He'd met Tesla in 1908 when he visited his lab to see a bladeless turbine. 11 years later, Gernsback recorded his impressions in Electrical Experimenter. The door opens, and out steps a tall figure, over 6 feet high, gaunt but erect. It approaches slowly, stately. You become conscious at once that you are face to face with a personality of a high order. Nikola Tesla advances and shakes your hand with a powerful grip, surprising for a man over 60. A winning smile from piercing light blue-gray eyes set in extraordinarily deep sockets. Fascinates you and makes you feel at once at home. You are guided into an office, immaculate in orderliness. Not a speck of dust is to be seen. Yeah, he had like OCD and he was a germaphobe. No papers litter the desk. Everything just so. It reflects the man himself, immaculate in attire, orderly and precise in his every movement, dressed in a dark frock coat. He's entirely devoid of all jewelry. No ring, stick pin, or even watch chain can be seen. Tesla speaks, a very high, almost falsetto voice. He speaks quickly and very convincingly. It is the man's voice chiefly which fascinates you. As he speaks, you find it difficult to take your eyes off his own. Only when he speaks to others do you have a chance to study his head, predominant of which is a very high forehead with a bulge between the eyes, the never-failing sign of exceptional intelligence. Then, the long, well-shaped nose proclaiming the scientist. How does this man, who has accomplished such tremendous work, keep young and manage to surprise the world with more and more new inventions as he grows older? How does this youth of 60, who is a professor of mathematics, a great mechanical and electrical engineer, and the greatest inventor of all time, keep his physical as well as remarkable mental freshness? Well, to answer that question, before we carry on, in earlier chapters, it is known that he was all about health, and he was experimenting with electricity, and not necessarily electrocuting himself, but passing electricity through him in a safe manner, or being around in some sort of field of it, and it was actually beneficial to him that he had found it. It improved his mental clarity and all around well-being. So it's almost some form of like electrical health and well-being regimens that he was using electricity in some way, shape, or form, and that's actually quite fascinating. So very, 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 very interesting. So where was I? So Gernsback employed the artist Frank R. Paul to show the world that what Tesla's tower would have looked like if it had been completed. For the cover of the Electrical Experimenter, Paul added transmitters and Tesla's wingless flying machines, zapping nearby ships with their death rays. Tesla was so thrilled, he used the illustration as his letterhead. I can just imagine. Yeah. In 1919, Electrical Experimenter serialized Tesla's autobiography, My Inventions. This too was illustrated by Frank Paul's drawing, along with photographs of the equipment. This boosted the circulation of the magazine to around 100,000 and provided Tesla modest income. However, Tesla felt he had been underpaid, and when Gernsback sought to put him on the cover of Electrical Experimenter again, Tesla refused, saying, I appreciate your unusual intelligence and enterprise, but the trouble with you seems to be that you were thinking only of H. Gernsback, first of all, once more, and then again. See? Yeah, he's getting pissed now. He's like, this guy's been fucked over his entire life. Like, this is probably like the last straw for him at this point. Like, he's not fucking around anymore. It sounds like he's had enough of everybody's shit from the sounds of it. And he has. He got fucked over left, right, and center if the stories are true. Based on the stories, yes. He got, like, the moment he moved, like, the first time he stepped foot in New York City, he got robbed. Like, Uh, it's just like one thing after another. Every company he's worked for, they stole his stuff, pushed him out of the company, whatever the case may be. He's had a rough go. But so yeah, nevertheless, Gernsback never stinted in his praise of Tesla, running his articles in several of his magazines. He even latched onto some of Tesla's more outlandish ideas. While Tesla did not believe in extrasensory perception or mind reading in the psychic sense, he did think it possible to read another person's thoughts by attaching television equipment to their retina. Paul depicted this on his cover of Science Wonder Stories in October 1929, which showed two people wearing thought-reading helmets. Can you guys see that? There's a bit of a glare. There we go. It's pretty funny, eh? It looks like the Men in Black in the back here. I don't know if you can see that there. But yeah, like, it's so strange. Imagine, like, people walking around or, like, sitting in... It almost looks like some, like, VR helmets. That's really cool. Anyways. Yeah, so the Chicago years is the next section we're going to read. Just let me have a sip of my drink here. Excuse me a sec, guys. Alrighty. Okay, the Chicago years. Tesla stayed in Chicago until the end of World War One. He worked on his turbines at Pile National. Again, he refused a salary. Oh, Mr. Modest Tesla. So it's like weird because like it's always just back and forth with the dude. Like all through all these chapters. Like one minute he wants the money, the next he doesn't. Sometimes he wants fame and glory and it goes to his head and he's all fucked up about it. And other times it's like he doesn't even care. It's like two different people. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. So I'm a little confused. But anyways, continuing on. He refused a salary, hoping to make bigger profits from his inventions in the end. But like he always had nothing but problems, so it seems silly. But anyway, but earning nothing from his wireless patents, his only source of income was the Waltham Watch Company, who were manufacturing a speedometer he had designed. The big ship. Tesla was still depending on his turbines to make him rich. Within 4 months, he told Jack Morgan before he left New York, my big ship is still to come in, he said, but I have a marvelous opportunity, having perfected an invention that will astound the whole world. But he had yet to perfect it. The high rotational speed put too much stress on the discs, which risked cracking. Various alloys were tried. However, the advantage of his turbine was obvious. Suppose that the steam pressure of the locomotive would vary from, say, 50 to 200 pounds. No matter how rapidly, he wrote, this would not have the slightest effect on the performance of the turbine. Obviously. The U.S. Machine Manufacturing Company asked about putting on one in an airplane. The Chicago Pneumatic Tool Company also made inquiries. He told George Scherf that he was expecting to make $25 million a year from his turbines. All the while, the debts kept piling up. Interesting. Made in Milwaukee. Tesla finally succeeded in getting the Allis-Chalmers Manufacturing Company of Milwaukee interested. They made reciprocating engines, turbines, and other heavy machinery. However, he displayed a lack of tactic and diplomacy that ruined the project from the outset. Insisting on entering negotiations with the senior staff, he went directly to the president of the company. And while his engines were preparing a feasibility report, Tesla contacted the board of directors and sold them the idea before the engineers had had their say. 3 of Tesla's turbines were built. 2 had 20 discs that were 18 inches in diameter, and Tesla had tested with 80 pounds of pressure. They developed 200 horsepower at between 10,000 and 12,000 RPM. This had the same output as Tesla's 1911 models, with the discs half the diameter when operating at 125 pounds pressure and 9,000 RPM. They also built a larger version as well. Consulting engineer of the steam turbine department wrote a report saying, we also built a 500 kilowatt steam turbine to operate at 3,600 revolutions. The turbine rotor consisted of 15 discs, 60 inches in diameter and 1/8 of an inch thick. The discs were placed approximately 1/8 of an inch apart. The unit was tested by connecting to a generator. The maximum mechanical efficiency was obtained on this unit was approximately 38% when operating at steam pressure of approximately 80 pounds absolute and a back pressure of approximately 3 pounds absolute. I absolutely don't know what that means, but maybe someone else does. That's something I'll have to look into more, is the steampunk era of our time, but I'll get there eventually. So, when the steam pressure was increased above that, given the mechanical efficiency dropped, consequently, the design of these turbines was of such a nature that in order to obtain maximum efficiency at high pressure, it would have been necessary to have more than one turbine in series. So, Dahlstrand reported that difficulties were encountered in the Tesla turbine from the vibration, making it necessary to reinforce the discs, and that this difficulty is common to all turbines. Vibration, cracked wheels, and wrecked turbines sometimes within a few hours. They wrecked the turbines sometimes within a few hours of operation, or a few years of operation. Wow. This vibration was caused by taking such terrific amounts of power from the relatively light machinery. They reported other problems. The efficiency of small turbine units compared with their efficiency obtainable on small impulse turbines running at speeds where they can be directly connected to pumps and other machinery. It is obvious, therefore, that the small unit, in order to obtain the same efficiency, had to operate at from 10,000 to 12,000 revolutions, and it would have been necessary to provide the reduction gears between the steam turbine and the driven unit. Furthermore, the designs of the Tesla turbine could not compete as far as manufacturing costs with the smaller type of impulse units. It is also questionable whether the rotor discs, because of light construction and high stress, would have lasted any length of time if operating continuously. The above remarks apply equally to the large turbine running at 3,600 revolutions. It was found when this unit was dismantled that the discs had distorted to a great extent, and the opinion was that these discs would ultimately have failed if the unit had been operated for any length of time. The gas turbine was never constructed for the reason that the company was unable to obtain sufficient engineering information from Mr. Tesla, indicating even an approximate design that he had in mind. So, terminating the turbine. So Tesla seems to have walked out at this stage. Later, Tesla was asked why he stopped working with Alice Chalmers. He said, "They would not build the turbines as I wished." But he would not elaborate. I wonder why. So this company went on to manufacture a different type of gas turbine that was in production for years. A number of engineers had tried to explain the failure of Tesla's turbine. One expert said that while being a fine concept and an excellent machine, it was not that much better than other designs. Another said that not enough money had been spent on research and development. Metallurgy was in its infancy, and the instrumentation for measuring its performance had not been developed, nor had the magnetic bearing it would have needed to run efficiently. However, manufacturers have made pumps using Tesla's principles, and others have experimented with making the discs using advanced materials such as carbon fiber, titanium impregnated plastic, and Kevlar. In disappointment, Tesla returned to Colorado Springs, where he had conducted some experiments in the lab of the local engineering school and relived old times. After a sojourn at Waltham Watches in Boston, he worked on a petrol-powered turbine at Budd Manufacturing in Philadelphia. And he was not without his successes. He sold a motor that was used in a cinema equipment to Wisconsin Electric and Fluid Diode to an oil company that was said to be the only valving patent without moving parts. Money began coming in again, but never in the amounts that he over-optimistically predicted. So, next little section, Planet Earth Calling. Let's just give a sec. Oh, we're almost on the next chapter. Cool. So, Planet Earth Calling. Marconi moved on to Tesla's patch again when he claimed to have detected radio signals coming from the outside the atmosphere. Tesla poo-pooed this, claiming that Marconi was only picking up signals from other terrestrial wireless operators. This could not have been the case with his own signals from Mars in 1899, he claimed, as there were no radio transmitters with a range of more than a few miles at the time. Yeah, he was picking up signals. He was tripping out, thinking it was like from Mars, and Marconi was trying to take credit for it, but at the time, no one else had actually successfully been able to transmit those signals that far. But anyways, for more than a few miles at a time. Nevertheless, Robert Johnson wrote to Tesla, pointing out that once again, when Marconi had repeated one of his ideas, it was no longer laughed at. Communication with intelligence on other stars. It may someday be possible, said Marconi. Language may be a problem, but Marconi said, "Well, it is an obstacle, but I don't think it is insurmountable. You see, one might get through some message such as 2 plus 2 equals 4, and go on repeating it until an answer came back signifying yes, which would be one word. Mathematics must be the same throughout the physical universe. By sticking to math over a number of years, one might come to speech. It is certainly possible. Tesla said that he had little confidence in Marconi's idea of trying to communicate with aliens using mathematics. He thought it would be better to send pictures by wireless, the human face, for example. The New York Times was surely being sarcastic when it suggested that they follow up by sending movies. Perhaps it could even be a commercial enterprise. Didn't they end up sending something to space or something into space, like some gold something, and it has a whole bunch of information and like other things on it? I can't remember what it was called. Or maybe someone in the comments might know what I'm referring to, but it just has like the history of Earth or whatever, something along those lines, like a time capsule. But it's like supposedly they sent it in space or whatever the case may be. So, with this beginning, whole feature films can be sent by radio across the solar system and released on Mars on the night that sees their premiere on Broadway, the paper said. In 1919, rocket pioneer Robert Goddard published a method of reaching extreme altitudes, claiming that it would be possible to send things as far as the moon. Tesla said that the scheme seemed far-fetched, as the fuels then did not have the necessary explosive power. He also doubted that any rocket could operate at 459 degrees Fahrenheit, so below zero, the temperature of interplanetary space. So if they couldn't get to space at the time, how did they know what the temperature of it was? Just like I have a question, like the other yesterday, we were having this discussion where Tesla was in Colorado doing some experiments. He did this huge one, and he ended up blowing the power. Apparently he called the generator, the whoever was generating power for the city, and he called them and asked them to like fix it or see what was going on, and or they had a backup power generator and they refused to, and then he was forced to have to pay for it or whatever the case may be. But my question is, if there was no power, how are they able to communicate? Like, how is he calling him and telling him to, like, fix it? So like just little random stuff like that makes me question things. But I don't know what you guys think. So I think part 4 is like the final. This is like the final part of the book. Like, there's some other stuff to go through, but this is the final part, and then there's probably a few chapters to go through. So it's been an interesting read so far. Tesla's lived an interesting life, and it's definitely, like I said, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with this man, and it's pretty silly, and it's been pretty comical too to go through and see all of his shenanigans and all the kind of shady shit that he was up to, and it's always interesting to, like I said, to take a different perspective on history and silliness. Like, I heard a random tidbit of information the other day that because like Pope Gregory, I forget what number pope from back in the day, he was like superstitious of cats and said it was like something satanic or whatever the case may be, so he had them all killed. And because there was all these cats gone, that there was an infestation of rats, and the rats with the fleas and the black plague and whatever the case may be, and all these people died just because of they killed all the cats, and just like silly little things like that. It's just funny. History it's really silly. Like, the more I look at it, the more these stories seem made up to me. You know what I mean? It just seems like it's weird. Like, a lot of it just seems like bullshit. And no wonder they teach it mostly when we're like young, when we're kids. So, talking to pigeons, like Mike Tyson. He loves his pigeons. Apparently Tesla did too. Seems it's just you. What do you think so far, Northerly Nomad? What do you think about Tesla? Do you think he's a degenerate too, or is it just me? You're probably not even looking at the screen to respond, but that's okay. I'll just receive it through telepathy. Thank you. So the next little thing is talking to pigeons. This is Tesla talking. I have been feeding pigeons, thousands of them, for years. Thousands of them. I wonder how many he experimented on. But there was one pigeon, a beautiful bird, pure white with light gray tips on its wings. That one was different. It was a female. I wouldn't know that pigeon anywhere. No matter where I was, that pigeon would find me. When I wanted her, I had only to wish and call her, and she would come flying to me. She understood me, and I understood her. I love that pigeon. I loved her as a man loves a woman, and she loved me.
As long as I had her, there was a purpose in my life. But he's losing it at this point. How about that? See that? Fuck. What a guy. Whew. He's in love with the pigeon. So, back in New York, Tesla moved into the Hotel St. Regis Robert Johnson. Oh, sorry, St. Regis. Robert Johnson had been appointed ambassador to Italy, so his friends left for Rome. On his own, Tesla became more eccentric. Sounds like it. He would circle the block 3 times before entering the hotel, avoiding stepping on the cracks in the sidewalk. And he was fanatical about cleanliness, except when it came to pigeons, which he still fed outside the New York Public Library. Having given up on the appetites of his youth, he now practiced what he called gastronomical frugality, to which he owed his perpetual youth. According to Hugo Gernsback, Tesla believed that most people not only eat all of their bodily ills, but actually ate themselves to death by either consuming too much or else by eating food that does not agree with them. His daily menu consisted of one of 2 pints of warm milk and a few eggs prepared by himself. Lunch, none whatsoever as a rule. And then dinner, celery soup or similar, a single piece of meat or fowl, potatoes, and one other vegetable, a glass of light wine, and for dessert, perhaps a slice of cheese, and invariably a big raw apple, and that's all. While he ate very little, Tesla insisted that what he did eat must be of the highest quality. He was also an accomplished cook who invented a number of appetizing dishes. His only vice is his generosity, said Gernsback, the man who, by the ignorant onlooker, has often been called an idle dreamer, has made over $1 million out of his inventions and spent them as quickly on new ones. But Tesla is an idealist of the highest order, and to such men, money itself means but little. Filet mignon and roast duck. It's the title of the next section. So, actually, before we get going, I just want to have a little quick one there. So, Tesla contributes his longevity and in his family too, because they call them centenarians. So, a lot of his family members were living to over 100 years. So, if they were already living past that point, he would have some knowledge of what led them to that point, like whatever lifestyle led to the point of being able to live that long. So obviously, less is more, especially if you're not burning like, well, how much calories was he really burning on a daily basis? Like, if he's like over 60 years old at this point, he's still run around doing stuff, but like, how much food did he really need? You know what I mean? And like, they do talk about the benefits of fasting, and that, if you're always consuming too much food or whatever, your body doesn't have enough time to, it's spending all its energy on digestion instead of dealing with other functions. And sometimes fasting gives the body a chance to catch up on all those other functions to actually heal or create new cells or whatever the case may be. I think there's a process that the cell goes through or something. I can't remember the name, but I'm sure someone probably can remember that. But you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about. So, Tesla ate very little. He insisted that what he ate must be the best possible, which makes sense. It would have the highest amount of nutrition, and it's not like he was eating microwave macaroni and cheese. Like, he'd be dead. He would have been dead a long time before. Like food, and plus the food probably was more nutritious back then. You know what I mean? So it's his Where were we? Yes, Tesla's frugal diet in his later years is markedly different from his consumption in his heyday. Then, yeah, because in his heyday, like, he probably had like a hard life or whatever, or maybe it's interesting because they said when he'd go out with his friends and stuff, he was like hanging out with rich people, and maybe he wasn't used to that, so he was like trying to live that lifestyle, but he was like pigging out and stuff like that, and people were teasing him because he was always like eating ravenously and whatnot. So, it's interesting guy. So. Um, Tesla's frugal diet in his later years it's different from the consumption in his heyday. He would enjoy thick steaks, preferably filet mignon, and often two or three of them. Yeah, see? Though he never put on weight. He remained 10 stone, 142 pounds, from 1888 to around 1926, except for a brief period of illness when he lost 5 pounds. Wow, a whole 5 pounds. Later, he turned to lamb, ordering a roast saddle large enough to serve several people. He would eat only the central portion of the tenderloin. Another favorite was a crown of baby lamb chops, or duck roasted under a layer of celery stalks, a dish of his own invention. He would often supervise its cooking in the kitchen, and it would be the centerpiece when entertaining friends. But Tesla would only eat the meat either side of the breastbone. Oh, he was picky. Gradually, he substituted boiled fish, then turned to a vegetarian diet. Throughout his life, he drank milk, and towards the end, warm milk became the mainstay of his diet. When he was young, he drank a lot of coffee, although he decided it was bad for him. And what if he smoked? I don't think he did, but maybe. He had difficulty giving up, so with each meal, he would order a pot of coffee so that he could smell the aroma. Eventually, he went off the smell and gave up this practice. He had always avoided tea and cocoa, but along with wine, he drank whiskey. Yeah, yeah, there's his vice right there. This, he believed, was responsible for the longevity of his ancestors. Oh, so it wasn't the eating, it was the whiskey. Prolonged his own life. When Prohibition was introduced in 1919, Tesla denounced it, saying it was an intolerable infringement of the rights of an individual. It imposes. Yeah, imagine he was like a protester. When Prohibition was introduced in 1919, he announced it, saying it was an intolerable infringement of the rights of an individual. It imposes restrictions on the most needed and harmless of stimulants. He said, while permitting unlimited consumption of poisons by all classes from childhood to old age. He admitted that he had consumed enough alcoholic beverages to form a lake of no mean dimensions, but by being a law-abiding citizen, he gave it up, declaring, you think he probably had like a still in like some super secret like place manufactured that like popped out of the floor or something, like, who knows. So but being a law-abiding citizen, he gave it up, declaring that it was 6 months before he could digest a meal, and that abstinence would reduce his life expectation to 130 years. I feel sure that if everyone had done the same, he said, millions of Americans would have shortened their lifespan and thousands would have died in the first 2 years. A sudden change of diet or the omission of one of its important elements, especially in advanced years, is extremely dangerous. In later years, after the repeal of Prohibition, he would have a bottle of wine brought in an ice bucket, but not have it opened. It remained there purely to show that he could restrain himself from drinking. What a tease. Like, that's like, yeah, imagine. He had always been a heavy smoker. Yeah, there it is, in his youth. I knew it. Heavy smoker in his youth, particularly enjoying cigars. However, when he was in his early 20s, one of his sisters fell ill. She said she could try to get better if he gave up smoking. She recovered, and he never smoked again. So, extreme germ phobia. After studying microscopic organisms before he left Europe, Tesla developed a phobia about germs. The washroom in his laboratory was private. Yeah, he probably went around with like a little microscope just looking at everything, like losing his mind. He probably was like taking shots and probably was looking at his own body, like, and that's why he became a germaphobe. He probably like took the microscope to his skin. He's like, oh God, what is happening? And started freaking out. I just picture him running around the lab like a madman, like trying to. That's probably why he probably like did electrical cleansing or some sort of stuff. Like, this guy was pretty out there. So it's just funny to like imagine all these different situations of him like just losing it. Doing all this crazy like mad scientist shit to like deal with like everyday problems. But so the washroom in his laboratory was private. No one else was allowed to use it. He would be impelled to wash his hands on the slightest pretext, insisting that his secretary provide a freshly laundered towel each time to dry them. He would also avoid shaking hands, usually keeping his he probably does the elbow like people are doing these days. It probably look pretty silly. He wouldn't even shake people's hand, or people probably got like offended all the time. Like, he just like picture this guy like kind of like smirking at you, like, and he wouldn't even shake your hand. You meet him for the first time, he's like, yo, I'm Tesla, what up, like respect, like he was, that's all he cared about. Like, some people say that he was all about for the people, but I think he was all about Tesla and just being the best that he could be, but so yeah. This led to embarrassment when visitors advanced, proffering their hand. Yeah, I haven't even read this before. Guys, I haven't even read this. So like, I'll read, and then before I continue reading, I'll come to an assumption, and then it's funny. I really do enjoy when this happens, because then we'll continue reading, and then basically what I assumed or made the idea and what we discussed ends up happening. So sorry, continue on. So this led to embarrassment when visitors advanced. So the people are offering their hands, and yeah, if Tesla was caught unaware and his hand was shaken, he would rush to the washroom at first possible opportunity to scrub it, ignoring any business the visitor. Imagine like he's like you're like you go grab his hand and go to shake it. He notices and like the look of like on his, he runs away like this man like, and it's just silly. So yeah, he runs to the washroom. Doesn't matter what they were there to do or what kind of business they were there to conduct. to conduct, and he found it particularly nauseating when workmen ate their lunch with their dirty hands. Hotel staff were kept at a distance of at least 3 feet. Head waiters grew used to his demand to be seated at a table that was not to be used by other customers. He needed a fresh tablecloth with every meal, and that's like the worst customer ever. Imagine dealing with this man every day for like 20 years, wherever he was living, or whatever place that he was living at. He would then pick up each item with a serviette and polish it with another. Then he would drop both serviettes on the floor before attending to the next item of cutlery. And if a fly alighted on his table, he would insist that everything was removed from the table and the meal would start over. Oh my goodness. He lived in hotels that could meet his meticulous standards and only employed assistants that were scrupulously clean. When he visited the barbers to have his half-hour scalp massage 3 times a week, he insisted on fresh towels on his chair, but strangely he did not object to being shaved using the same brush and shaving mug as the other customers. What a guy. How about that? So, next little section we got here, stepping out in style. To the end of his life, Tesla was a fastidious dresser. Well-cut clothes suited his tall, slim figure. In the matter of clothes, he observed, the world takes a man at his own valuation. He wore white monogram silk shirts that had to withstand constant laundering. Collars and cuffs were discarded after a single use, as were handkerchiefs. Ties were replaced every week, costing $1 each. The only colors he would consider were red and black. They were tied in the old-fashioned four-in-hand style. His pajamas also had his initials embroidered on the left breast, and his linen arrived freshly packaged. Except on formal occasions, Tesla wore high-lace shoes, possibly to give his ankles extra support because of his height. They extended halfway up his calves. He insisted on a long, narrow shoe with a tapered square toe, which had to be handmade. His suits had waisted coats, and he usually wore a black bowler or derby, which gave him an air of quiet elegance. He carried a cane and wore gray suede gloves at $2.50 a pair. They were also replaced weekly, even if they were as clean as they had been when they came from the makers. Oh, so this is like a shot of them apparently like demolishing Wardenclyffe Tower. So that's kind of neat to look at, guys. If that interests you. Yeah. So, restless sleeping habits. Tesla claimed that he usually slept for just 2 hours a night, 3 hours being too much, but he would go to bed at 5 a.m. and get up at 10. The extra 3 hours rest he maintained was for quiet contemplation. Once a year he would sleep for the full 5 hours, which he said gave him a tremendous reserve of energy. In this, he competed with Edison, who claimed only to sleep 4 hours a night, though when he sat in his lab, he would take 2 3-hour naps a day. Tesla probably did the same. Hotel staff said they often found him sitting transfixed, and they found they could work around him in his home without disturbing him. He took brisk walks to aid his concentration, but even then, he was often in a dream. People who he knew quite well could walk past him, even though he appeared to be looking straight at them. In 1935, he said he was lucky not to have been killed while jaywalking in such a state. 2 years later, he was hit by a taxi and badly injured, though. Refusing to see a doctor, he limped home. He had 3 cracked ribs and was confined to bed for 6 months. All right, so back to Wardenclyffe again. So Wardenclyffe revisited. So, Tesla had still not given up on Wardenclyffe and sued the Waldorf Astoria over its destruction. He maintained that he put up Wardenclyffe as collateral against the $20,000 that he owed for the rent that he didn't pay when he was staying there. They assumed that it was theirs. They had torn it down to sell for scrap and resell the land. Tesla, of course, was expecting to make $30,000 a day from Wardenclyffe if it was ever finished. Excuse me. If he then paid the $20,000, the experimental station would then be his again. In court, he insisted that the Waldorf Astoria was supposed to take care of it, but even before it had been torn down, they had allowed vandals to break in and steal expensive equipment. You know, it probably wasn't vandals, it was probably like Edison and company, trying to get whatever they could out of there because they know that Tesla didn't have access to it or wherever the case would be. Or it was sold for scrap, one or the other. But, based on all the stories we've heard so far, Edison and boys and all those other schemers in the electrical mafia were always trying to fuck him over, apparently. So it would make sense that they probably robbed his lab as well. And, you know, wouldn't surprise me if they were trying to, you know, do all kinds of things throughout history to him. And maybe it was them all along, you know what I mean? So. Tesla still had not given up on Wardenclyffe. Yeah, so he was suing them. He maintained, yeah, I mentioned that. Where was I? Yeah, they had stolen the equipment. So during the trial, Tesla was to give a loving description of his lost palace. The attorney for the Waldorf Astoria tried to block this testimony, but the judge let him go ahead. The building formed a square about 100 feet by 100 feet. It was divided into 4 compartments with an office and a machine shop and 2 very large areas. The engines were located on one side and the boilers on the other side, and in the center, the chimney rose. There were 2 300 horsepower boilers surrounded by 2 16,000-gallon water tanks. To the right of the boiler plant was one 400 horsepower Westinghouse engine and a smaller 35 kilowatt engine to drive the dynamo for the lighting. Along with them was the main switchboard that controlled the pumps and various compressors. Towards the road, on the railroad side, was the machine shop. That compartment was 100 feet by 35 feet with a door in the middle, and it contained, I think, 8 lathes. Then there was the milling machine, a planer, a shaper, a spliner, 3 drills, 4 motors, a grinder, and a blacksmith's forge. Now, the compartment opposite there would contain the real expensive apparatus. There was 2 special glass cases where I kept historical apparatus, which was exhibited and described in my lectures and scientific articles. There were at least 1,000 bulbs and tubes, each which represented a certain phase of scientific development. There was also 5 large tanks, 4 of which contained special transformers created as to transform the energy for the plant. They were about, 7 feet high and about 5 feet by 5 feet each, and were filled with a special oil, which we would call transformer oil, to stand in electric tension of 60,000 volts. Then there was a 5th similar tank for special purposes, and there were my electric generating apparatus. That apparatus was precious because it could flash a message across the Atlantic, and yet it was built in 1894 or 1895. How about that? The Waldorf Astoria's attorney objected again, but the judge allowed Tesla to continue. Beyond the door of this compartment, there were to be condensers, what we call electric condensers, which would store the energy and then discharge and make it go around the world. Some of these condensers were in an advanced state of construction and others were not. Then there was a very expensive piece of apparatus that the Westinghouse Company furnished me, and only 2 of its kind have ever been constructed. It was developed by myself with their engineers. That was a steel tank which contained a very elaborate assemblage of coils and elaborate regulating apparatus. Elaborate because, this is me talking, because what we've learned so far, and even from reading this book, that the amount of turns of the copper coil will have an effect on the magnetic field as well as stepping up and stepping down voltage. And that's an interesting thing. So obviously he experimented many times. So a certain number of rotations of wire will equal one thing. So I'm sure there's some formulas out there, and I will want to look into it further down the road. So it's definitely very, very interesting. So he went on, where was I? He went on to describe a special 100 horsepower motor equipped with elaborate devices for rectifying the alternating currents and sending them back to the condensers. On this apparatus alone, Tesla said that he had spent thousands of dollars. Then along the center of the room, I had a very precious piece of apparatus. He said it was his remote-controlled boat. So, a bolt from the blue. Asked whether that was all, Tesla replied, "Oh, no, it's nowhere near." And he went on to describe a series of cupboards that contained numerous devices that each represented a different phase in the development of his work. In the testing room, there were other instruments, some of which had been given to him by Lord Kelvin. Tesla then described the tower with its expensive underground workings containing special apparatus for gripping the earth. Before I continue, it's interesting. Some people have made comparisons of Wardenclyffe to that of the pyramids, and I've seen some of it. I'd like to look into it a little more, and I'm sure there's some people out there that have saw that and might be curious about that. But just basically, same technology, just in different form. You know what I mean? They were doing the same thing, just built out of different materials. But carrying on. So the shaft, Your Honor, was first covered with timber and inside with steel. In the center of this, there was a winding stairs going down, and in the center of the stairs was a big shaft through which the current was to pass. And this shaft was so figured in order to tell exactly where the nodal point is. So I could calculate exactly the size of the Earth or the diameter of the Earth and measure exactly within 4 feet with that machine. And then the real expensive work was to connect that central part with the Earth. And there I had special machines rigged up, which would push the iron pipes one length after another. And I pushed, I think, 16 of them 300 feet down. The current through these pipes was able to take hold of the Earth. Now that was a very expensive part of the work, but it does not show on the tower, but it belongs to the tower. The primary purpose of the tower, Your Honor, was to telephone, to send the human voice and likeness around the globe. He wanted everyone to be able to FaceTime each other, basically. That was my discovery, and that I announced in 1893. And now all the wireless plants are doing that. There's not another system being used. Then the idea was to reproduce this apparatus and connect it just with a central station and telephone office, so that you may pick up your telephone, and if you wanted to talk to a subscriber in Australia, you would simply call up that plant, and that plant would connect you immediately. And I had contemplated to have press messages, stock quotations, pictures for the press, and reproductions of signatures, checks, and everything transmitted from there. Yeah, we can do that now. You can take a picture of a check from your phone and deposit it into your bank. So, yeah, it's interesting to think about for sure. So Tesla was asked whether he had any warning that the tower was going to be demolished. He replied, "No, sir. It came like a bolt from a blue sky." Although the Waldorf Astoria had not accounted for the machinery, they had sold off and destroyed property worth $350,000 to recoup $20,000. The judge found in favor of the hotel, who also had the last word. As a solace to the wild hopes of this dreamy inventor, if prior to that time he should grasp in his fingers any one of the castles in Spain which always were floating about in his dreams, and had he paid the board bills which he owed, this wild, scrubby woodland, including the Tower of Babel thereon, would cheerfully have been reconveyed to him. Womp womp, that sucks. Listening to my communist overtures. The 19 U.S. presidential election was the first to be broadcast to a national audience. Though Lee DeForest had announced the wrong winner to a small audience 4 years before. In Italy, fascist leader Benito Mussolini saluted Marconi. His national broadcasting system allowed the dictator to reach the entire Italian nation after he came into power in 1922. Meanwhile, Vladimir Lenin, who had led the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, made overtures to Tesla, asking him to come to the Soviet Union to build power stations and an AC distribution system. Tesla was also invited to speak at a meeting at a meeting of the Friends of the Soviet Russia in Springfield, Massachusetts. Traveling there with Ivan Mashkeev from the Russian Workers' Club of Manhattan. At the meeting, the organizers, a group of Italian radicals, addressed Tesla mysteriously as Bettini. According to an FBI agent at the event, Tesla prophesied that Italy would soon adopt a communist form of government. However, there is no evidence that he knew what he was getting himself into. Tesla took little interest in the politics, and he was at best naive. Man, this guy was getting himself into all sorts of fucking shenanigans over the years, and shady people, and shady deals, and what a guy. So, waiting for the midnight hour. Sounds like a song title. While commuting to Milwaukee, Tesla was paying $15 a day for room 1607. Check that out, the Gematria, for you guys there in the comments if you're bored. In the Hotel St. Regis on Fifth Avenue. However, he neglected to pay. This guy, he's probably like, what are those people that just go around strictly hustling? Like, he was like a con artist or something. It's just like he's always hustling people for like rent and all these different things and running away and not paying his bills and fucking people over too. So, maybe that's his karma, because we hear all these stories of him getting screwed over, and then we hear all sorts of things about how he's screwing people over. So I don't know how bad I feel for him at this point. I was forced to move to the Hotel Marguerite on Park Avenue. Like, eventually they just have like a poster up of his face, like, do not let this guy come in, not allowed on the premises, or permanently banned from every single hotel. Like, eventually, and like, he's such a popular person, like, you'd see him down the road, like, they'd like lock the door before he comes in. Don't let him try to talk you into getting a room for the night, or else you'll never leave. He'll be there for 20 years and you'll never evict him, and he won't pay his rent. The most this crazy genius inventor, but he can't pay his rent or pay his bills. But he basically invented the electrical world that we live in today. But so like these, it's just fucking silliness, guys. But anyways, where was I? So yeah, he was forced to a different place to rent. Fortunately, this was still close to his nighttime haunts. Grand Central Station and Bryant Park behind New York Public Library. He was spotted there one night, sporting his derby, cane, and white gloves by the New York World. Midnight is the hour he chooses for his visits. Tall, well-dressed, of dignified bearing, he whistles several times, a signal for the pigeons on the ledges of the building to flutter down about his feet. With a generous hand, the man scatters peanuts on the lawn from a bag. A proud man, yet humble in his charities. The first thing that comes to mind, you know how there's like politicians and other things, they're like doing these adverts to make them look like real people and like they care and stuff, and it's like these fake situations or whatever. That's how I just picture the way they describe that situation there. Is pretty funny. Alright, so moving on. How this man worked. A young science journalist named Kenneth Sweezy, once praised by Albert Einstein for his explanation of the Archimedes principle, sought out Tesla. While Sweezy was only 19 and Tesla in his late 60s, they became firm friends for the rest of his life. According to Sweezy, Tesla sometimes greeted him at the door stark naked, but insisted that Tesla was absolutely celibate. Wow, okay, he was doing the naked man. You know that thing guys do? They just kind of appear naked and hope something happens. Don't they call it the naked man? So Tesla pulled the naked man. Okay. He confirmed that Tesla slept less than 2 hours a night, though he would occasionally doze to recharge his batteries. He would walk to 8 to 10 miles a day and relax in his bathtub, though gone was the electric shower that bombarded him with cleansing particles. He would also clench and unclench his toes 100 times each night to stimulate the brain cells. The brain cells, Sweezy recalled. And how this man worked, I will tell you about a little episode. I was sleeping in my room, like one dead. It was 3 after midnight. Suddenly the telephone ring awakened me. Through my sleep I heard his voice. Sweezy, how are you? What are you doing? This was one of many conversations in which I did not succeed in participating. He spoke animatedly with pauses as he had worked out a problem, comparing one theory to another, commenting, and when he felt he arrived at the solution, he suddenly closed the telephone. In 1926, Tesla moved to the Hotel Pennsylvania. See, he moved again. Moved again. He probably didn't pay his bills in another place. So he moved to the Hotel Pennsylvania, where the tall, thin, ascetic man was interviewed by Collier's magazine, and he gave another of his predictions. Oh, he's looking pretty gaunt there. The struggle of the human female towards sex equality will end in a new social order, with the human female as superior. Tesla forwarded his predictions to J.P. Morgan's daughter Anne, who had remained in touch with and was now an advocate for the women's movement. That's him, 77 years old in 1933. How about that? So, into the realms of the future. It was around that time Tesla retired. Miss Dorothy F. Scarrett, Tesla's secretary until he closed his office at 70, described him at that age. As one approached Mr. Tesla, you beheld a tall, gaunt man. He appeared to be an almost divine being. When he was 70, he stood erect, his extremely thin body immaculately and simply attired in clothing of a subdued coloring. Neither scarf, pin, nor ring adorned him. His bushy black hair was parted in the middle and brushed back briskly from his high, broad forehead, deeply lined by his close concentration on scientific problems that stimulated and fascinated him. From under protruding eyebrows, his deep-set, steel-gray, soft yet piercing eyes seemed to read your innermost thoughts. As he waxed enthusiastic about fields to conquer and achievements to attain, his face glowed with almost ethereal radiance. and his listeners were transported from the commonplaces of today to imaginative realms of the future. His genial smile and nobility of bearing always denoted the gentlemanly characteristics that were so ingrained in his soul. How about that? Too great a sacrifice. In an interview with the New York World in 1926, he said, "Sometimes I feel that by not marrying, I made too great a sacrifice to my work. So I have decided to lavish all the affection of a man, no longer young, on the feathery tribe. I am satisfied, if anything, will live for posterity. But to care for those homeless, hungry, or sick birds is the delights of my life. It is my only means of playing." One particular pigeon was special to him. When he found it, it had a broken leg and wing. Using my mechanical knowledge, I invented a device by which I supported its body in comfort in order to let the bones heal. He kept the bird in his hotel suite and figured that it cost him more than $2,000 to heal her. It took a year and a half before she was well again, and Tesla said she was one of the finest and prettiest birds I had ever seen. My life's work was finished. His love of that one pigeon and her death affected him profoundly. He told John O'Neill, when she was ill, he must have been losing it at this point because he's just going off about pigeons and birds and how beautiful they are and this and the next thing, that, and the next thing. So, when she was ill, I knew and understood. She came to my room and I stayed beside her for days. I nursed her back to health. That pigeon was the joy of my life. If she needed me, nothing else mattered. As long as I had her, there was a purpose in my life. Then one night, as I was lying in my bed in the dark, solving problems as usual, she flew in through the open window and stood on my desk. I knew she wanted me. She wanted to tell me something important, so I got up and went to her. As I looked at her, I knew she wanted to tell me she was dying. And then, as I got her message, there came a light from her eyes. Powerful beams of light. It was a real light, a powerful, dazzling, blinding light, a light more intense than I had ever produced by the most powerful lamps in my laboratory. When that pigeon died, something went out of my life. Up to that time, I knew with a certainty that I would complete my work, no matter how ambitious my program. But when that something went out of my life, I knew my life's work was finished. So that was his breaking point. The little birdie died. Oh, right, the next chapter. Let me just have a little flip through here. So we got like 2 chapters left, guys. What do you think? Should I keep going? Do you guys need a break? Do you want to have a little discussion before I carry on? How do you guys feel? I know there's a few of you here. How do you guys feel? Do you want me to continue reading? Any questions, comments? Anything of that nature? Alright. So, chapter 14. A new source of energy. This is Albert Einstein speaking here. Apparently. I'm happy to hear that you are celebrating your 75th birthday, and that, as a successful pioneer in the field of high-frequency currents, you have been able to witness the wonderful development of this field of technology. I congratulate you on the magnificent success of your life's work. While working on his petrol-powered turbine in Philadelphia between 1924 and 1925, Tesla met John B. Flowers, an inspector of an aircraft factory. With development of his bladeless turbine reaching a dead end, Tesla returned to the idea of powering planes and cars remotely from large central power stations like the one he tried to build at Wardenclyffe. At his hotel suite, Flowers helped draft a proposal to test and implement Tesla's wireless power system to present it to J.H. Dillinger, head of the radio laboratory at the Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C. Flowers told Dillinger that the Tesla system would power a plane at any point around the world, and that Tesla had already developed an oscillator to provide the power, which he was willing to give to the American government if they agreed to build the plant. A meeting in Washington was arranged, and Dillinger sent the proposal to the physicist Harvey L. Curtis. The 10-page document outlined a plan to use standing waves to operate cars and planes. To demonstrate this, a sketch showed a balloon standing in for the Earth and a mechanical oscillator standing in for the electrical device. A mechanical oscillator arm was fastened to the tied opening of a rubber balloon. And it was 20 inches in diameter. The oscillator arm was operated with an electrical motor at 1,750 RPM by means of an eccentric on the motor shaft. The balloon hung free in the air. The rubber surface of the balloon represented the Earth's conducting surface, and the air inside its insulating interior. The waves were propagated in the rubber surface at the rate of 51 feet per second. The frequency of transmission was 29 cycles per second, and the wavelength was 21 inches. The mechanical oscillator was used in place of Tesla's electrical oscillator, as it represents an almost perfect analogy. Standing or stationary waves of the rubber surface replaced the electromagnetic waves of Tesla's system. By the test of his analog, the operation of Tesla's system can be forecast. When the oscillator arm was set in motion by operating the motor, there were 3 standing waves having 6 loops on the Earth's surface, all having the same amplitude of vibration. When the finger was pushed against one or more loops, all the loops were reduced in amplitude in the same proportion, showing the ability to obtain all the power out at one or more points. The waves extended completely around the world and returned to the sending station. Right? He wasn't he? This story is wild of this man, like all the shit that he was up to, scheming, ripping, like he was getting ripped off, but he was like never paying his bills. He was like dipping out on hotel bills all the time, and all sorts of shit that he was up to, man. It's hilarious. It's actually, yeah, quite funny. So, where was I? Curtis rejected this proposal, as with Tesla's standing waves, there would be a concentration of energy at the nodes, but as Curtis pointed out, the system proposed by Mr. Flowers does not have this feature. He proposes to collect energy at any point. Some means would have to be devised for concentrating this energy and making it available. No such method has been proposed, and I do not think any of that would be feasible. I do not know of any wireless apparatus of sufficient magnitude to warrant the expectation that power can be economically transmitted by radio methods faster than the speed of light. So, Tesla denied that electricity would be available only at the nodal points, advising that in a hydraulic system, the pressure of the fluid is the same throughout. There is energy available at an electrical outlet even when nothing is plugged in. He explained that the oscillations would be spread from his magnifying transmitter, theoretically, at an infinite speed, then slow down. At very first quickly, then at a slower rate. After around 6,000 miles, they would travel at the speed of light. From there on, it increases in speed, slowly at first, then more rapidly, reaching the antipode, which with approximately infinite velocity. The laws of motion can be expressed by stating that waves on the terrestrial surface sweep in equal intervals of time over equal areas. But it must be understood that the currents penetrate deep into the earth, and the effects produced on the receivers are the same as if the whole flow was confined to the Earth's axis, joining the transmitter with the antipode. The mean surface speed is thus about 471,000 kilometers per second, 57% greater than that of the so-called Hertz waves. There was a problem with this. James Clerk Maxwell's equations predicted the speed of light at 186,000 miles a second, or 300,000 kilometers a second. At first, it was assumed that this speed was relative to the background ether that electromagnetic radiation propagated through, but the Michelson-Morley experiment showed there was no such thing as ether. Einstein, realizing that this meant the speed of light was an absolute, and there was no such thing as speed faster than light. Tesla railed against Einstein and relativity. He would not accept the concept of curved space, as predicted by Einstein's theory of general relativity. Either. But Einstein, with his Nobel Prize, was the new star in the scientific firmament. He was the new superstar. Look at him. Tesla, Edison, who died in 1931, Bell, who died in 1922, and the Wright brothers, who died in 1912 and 1948, were old hat. Business as usual. Despite Despite the rejection of their plans in Washington, Flowers and Tesla went to Detroit to try and sell his flying automobile to General Motors. Tesla also tried to sell his speedometer to Ford, but its high cost made it better suited to luxury cars. In Detroit, Tesla met his nephew, Nicholas Trobojevic, and there was an incident that became part of the family lore. The two were going for a late snack in an expensive hotel. The head waiter suggested that they wait 5 minutes. Then the $5 coverage would be lifted. The cover charge would be lifted. This was in the middle of the Great Depression, when $5 would feed a family for a week. But Tesla was not prepared to wait. When he questioned his uncle over the matter of the cover charge, Tesla said, "I'll never die rich unless the money comes in the door faster than I shovel it out of the window." Tesla held talks with U.S. Steel concerning installing his bladeless turbines on the exhaust fan from the blast furnaces, generating huge amounts of electricity. But apparently a test did not go ahead. Then in Buffalo, Tesla conducted some top-secret experiments. It was said that the petrol engine of the Pierce Arrow sedan was replaced by an AC induction motor. The power receiver was using 12 vacuum tubes, was set in the dashboard, connected to a 6-foot... I imagine what this car would look like. Dashboard connected to a 6-foot antenna. There's other speculation that it was powered by steam or petrol-driven turbine, but no physical evidence of either design has been found. While experimenters were using Tesla coils to try and split the atom, Tesla himself was making more outlandish predictions, saying that all machinery on Earth could be powered by cosmic rays. Unlimited quantities of power could be transmitted through wires or wirelessly from a central station to anywhere on the globe. Hold on, I missed a page. No, I didn't miss a page, but let's take a look at this for a sec. Yeah, just give me a sec, guys. I just realized my phone's about to die. I gotta grab the charger. Just bear with me for a sec, please. I find this book pretty neat because finding a lot of pictures that I haven't seen before, and it's just neat to see a different, it's like I said, we're kind of looking at him from a different perspective, so I enjoy this. So where did I leave off? Yeah, so central station anywhere on the globe. Eliminating the need for coal, oil, gas, or any other terrestrial energy source. Already the central source of energy on Earth was the sun. He said, but the new source of power would not be turned off at night. Heralding a new industrial revolution. With just 5 days to go to his 75th birthday, Tesla said that he would soon announce, by far, the most important discovery of his long career. It will throw the light on many puzzling phenomena of the cosmos, he said, and may prove also of great industrial value, particularly in creating a new and virtually unlimited market for steel. He said that he had been wonderfully fortunate in coming up with new ideas that he was sure would be remembered by posterity. He was confident that his rotating magnetic field induction motor and wireless system would live on long after he was gone. Didn't really happen that way, did it, guys? But he still considered his latest discoveries the most important. They would mark a new departure in science, be of great practical values, and inaugurate a new industrial revolution, he said. He had already succeeded in proving his theories by experimentation, and if the calculations based on them turned out to be true, the world would have a new source of energy in practically unlimited amounts available at any point on the globe, but again, he was tantalizingly vague when it came to the details. I can only say at this time that it will come from an entirely new and unsuspected source, and be for all practical purposes constant day and night, and at all times of the year. The apparatus for capturing the energy and transforming it will partake both mechanical and electrical features, and will be of ideal simplicity. At first, cost may be found too high, but this obstacle will be overcome. Moreover, the installment will be, so to speak, indestructible, and will continue to function for any length of time without additional expenditures. So maintenance fucking free. Guaranteed. So the press had heard such promises from Tesla before, and wanted to know when he was going to make an official announcement of his new discoveries. But the great man was unwilling to be pinned down. These ideas had not come to him overnight. but as a result of intense study and experimentation for nearly 36 years. He said he was anxious to give the facts to the world as soon as possible, but wished to present them in a finished form. That may take a few months or a few years, he said. All the energy that the Earth receives from all the suns and stars of the universe is only about 1/4 of 1% of that which it receives directly from the sun. Therefore, it would be incomparably more rational to harness the heat and light rays of the sun than attempt to capture the insignificant energy of this radiation. We can do it now, and we are doing it to a certain extent, but the tremendous handicap is found in the periodic character of this kind of energy supply. Many attempts have been made in this direction, but invariably it was found that the power was too expensive. Dismissing atomic energy. So, having rejected Einstein's theory of relativity, Tesla had also dismissed the idea of atomic energy. The idea of atomic energy is illusionary, he said, but it has taken so powerful hold on the minds that although I have preached against it for 25 years, there are still some who believe it to be realizable. He claimed to have disintegrated atoms in his experiment with the high potential vacuum tube he developed in 1896, which he considered one of his best inventions. He operated a range of potentials from 4 million to 18 million volts. He said he had designed an apparatus that would work at 50 million volts, which should produce results of a great scientific importance. But as to atomic energy, my experimental observations have shown that the process of disintegration is not accompanied by a liberation of such energy as might be expected from the present theories, he said. Cosmic rays and beyond. Tesla claimed to have discovered cosmic rays while investigating X-rays and radioactivity in Colorado Springs in 1899. But his findings were in disagreement with theories advanced more recently. I have satisfied myself that the rays are not generated by the formation of new matter in space, a process which would be like water running up a hill, nor do they come to any appreciable amount from the stars. According to my investigations, the sun emits a radiation of such penetrative power that it is virtually impossible to absorb it in lead or other substances. It has, furthermore, other extraordinary properties, in regard to which I shall express myself at some future date. This ray, which I call the primary solar ray, gives rise to a secondary radiation by impact against the cosmic dust scattered through space. It is a secondary radiation which now is commonly called the cosmic rays, and comes, of course, equally from all directions in space. He also dismissed the idea that radioactivity resulted from activity within radioactive substances. It was caused by rays emitted from the sun. If radium could be screened effectively from this ray, it would cease to be radioactive, he said. He had also been designing rocket ships that he could attain speeds of nearly a mile a second. That's 3,600 miles an hour, or 5,793 kilometers per hour. So it's fairly fast. Through the rarefied medium above the stratosphere. So again, he hoped his rocket ships would bring world peace. I anticipate that such machines will be of tremendous importance in international conflicts in the future. I foresee that in times not too distant, wars between various countries will be carried on without a single combatant passing the border. At this very time, it is possible to construct such infernal machines which will carry any desired quantity of poisoned gases and explosives, launch them against a target thousands of miles away, and destroy a whole city. If wars are not done away with, we are bound to come eventually to this kind of warfare, because it is the most economical means of inflicting injury and striking terror in the hearts of enemies that ever has been imagined. Densely populated countries like England, Japan will be at a great disadvantage compared with those embracing vast territories such as the United States and Russia. Although some of Tesla's ideas in later life can be dismissed as the ravings of a mad scientist, sometimes he shows remarkable prescience, sending signals to the stars. Just give me a second, guys. So they say. He apparently was the brightest man of his time, but not bright enough to stop himself from getting robbed and ripped off on every turn and corner and every avenue and every business that every person that he went into business basically pretty much screw him over. So he was very maybe book smart, but he was definitely not street smart. That's for damn sure. And he had a lot of pride, a big ego. Alcoholic, addicted to gambling. Pretty sure he murdered his brother. There's a lot of juicy details we've been going through the past few days. So looking into this man's life, and brings a lot of questions. And we do think about suppressed technology and the idea that there's a lot of false history that we've been given. So some of these figureheads that we see might have just been actors, and maybe they didn't invent shit. Maybe they were just reverse engineering things. You know what I mean? We don't know the whole story. We can only kind of get little bits and pieces, and so it's interesting. Either situation is possible, but as time goes on, eventually we'll lean more to one or the other. It just feels like controlled opposition, in my opinion. But anyhow, so sending signals to the stars. When Time magazine put the aging and eccentric inventor on the cover of the 20th of July 1931 issue to celebrate his 75th birthday, Tesla did not disappoint. He told them of his new invention, the Teslascope, that he could use to signal the stars, saying, I think that nothing can be more important than interplanetary communication. What's that Beastie Boys song? Anyway, so intergalactic planetary, yeah. So it will certainly come someday, and the certitude that there are other human beings in the universe working, suffering, struggling like ourselves will produce a magic effect on mankind and will form the foundation of universal brotherhood that will last as long as humanity itself. Asked when this would happen, he said, I have been leading a secluded life, one of continuous concentrated thought and deep meditation. Naturally enough, I have accumulated a great number of ideas. The question is whether my physical powers will be adequate to working them out and giving them to the world. He also claimed that with 15 million volts, the highest ever used, he split atoms over and over again, but no energy was released. The Times article carried several other amusing stories about Tesla. It said that he left the Swank Hotel, St. Regis, after the maids complained that he kept 4 pet pigeons in his roll-top desk, and that while walking down an icy Fifth Avenue, he slipped, threw himself into a flying somersault, landed on his feet, unperturbed, kept on walking. Time reported more eccentricities. At the hotel, Governor Clinton, where he was now, it was like he was all over the place. Like, this man, never paid rent. He just hotel hopped all the time. It's hilarious. If someone rings him up on the telephone or knocks at his door, and he does not want to answer, he locks himself in the bathroom, turns the water loudly on. He's very sensitive to sensory stimuli. When he gets excited, blinding lights flash through his mind. He retreats to a bed. A lifelong bachelor. Habitually, he goes to bed at 5:30 a.m., rises at 10:30 a.m., but he does not sleep the whole period. Proudly, yet almost plaintively, he explains, I roll around and work on my problems. That's funny. The plaudits of peers. Birthday accolades flooded in. Over 100 letters of congratulation were received from other scientists or inventors, including Sir Oliver Lodge, Lee De Forest, and Albert Einstein. Notably absent were birthday greetings from Marconi and Pupin, and none could match the tribute bestowed on Edison when he died 3 months later, and the lights of New York were dimmed in reverence. Naturally, Tesla was full of new predictions. I feel that we are nearing a period when the human mind will perform greater wonders than ever before, he said. This is due to the continuous refinement of means and methods of observation and ever-increasing delicacy of our perception. We were about to conquer nature, contact beings on other planets, and transmit huge amounts of power vast distances. A reporter from the New York Times again asked him when he was going to make his discovery public. There was a trace of regret in his voice, and he answered, said the paper, and the look of a man who has worked enough for centuries and only a few years to do it in. Tesla then quoted Goethe. He had not read that for 40 years, he said, and he quoted it from memory. He was also at odds, or Gautier, is it Gautier? Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, guys, I'm butchering some of these pronunciations, but I'm doing the best I can. So, he was also at odds with new ideas of quantum mechanics. There is no chance in nature, he said, although the modern theory of determinacy attempts to show scientifically that events are governed by chance. I positively deny that. The causes and effects, however complex, are intimately linked, I agree, and the result of all interference must be inevitably fixed as by a mathematical formula. Waves in time and space. He reasserted that human beings were automatons, completely under the control, so we're robots, completely under the control of external forces, and he denied the existence of individuality, saying, "It took me not less than 20 years to develop a faculty to trace every thought or act of mine to an external influence. We are just waves in time and space, changing continuously, and the illusion of individuality is produced through the concatenation of the rapidly succeeding phases of existence. What we define as likeness is merely the result of symmetrical arrangement of molecules which compose our body." He also denied the existence of the soul or spirit, saying that we're merely expressions of, so we're just animals basically, of the functions of the body. These functions cease with death, and so do the soul and spirit, he said. What humanity needs is ideals. Idealism is the force that will free us from material fetters. Photographing thought. At 77, Tesla told a journalist from the Kansas City Journal-Post that he expected soon to be able to photograph thoughts. Interesting. I wonder if they have those patents. I wonder if they can see into our dreams or read our thoughts at distance. That's a scary thought. Anyway, so that's even worse than some people's search histories. Anyway, so in 1893, while engaged in certain investigations, I became convinced that a definite image formed in thought must reflex action, produce a corresponding image on the retina, which might possibly be read by suitable apparatus. This brought me to my system of television, which I announced at that time. Is he suggesting that the TV could have been taking pictures of people's thoughts or reading people's thoughts? Anyway, so my idea was to employ an artificial retina receiving the image of the object seen, an optic nerve, and another such retina at the place of reproduction. These two retinas were to be constructed after the fashion of a checkerboard with many separate little sections, and the so-called optic nerve was nothing more than a part of the earth. An invention of mine enables me to transmit simultaneously without any interference whatsoever hundreds of thousands of distinct impulses through the ground, just as though I had so many separate wires. I did not contemplate using any moving part, a scanning apparatus, or a cathodic ray, which is a sort of moving device, the use of which I suggested in one of my lectures. Now, if it be true that a thought reflects an image on the retina, it is a mere question of illuminating the same property and taking photographs, and then using the ordinary methods which are available to project the image on a screen. If this can be done successfully, then the objects imagined by a person would be clearly reflected on the screen as they are formed, and in this way every thought of the individual could be read. Our minds would then indeed be like open books. As always, he claimed to have discovered a new source of power. He was not ready to go into details. He had to check his findings before they could be formally announced. But he had been working the underlying principles for many years. From the practical point of view, his generator would require a huge initial investment, but once a machine was installed, it would work indefinitely, and the cost of operation would be next to nothing. Perfect. So, but this time he gave more details. The design was relatively simple. Just a big mass of steel, copper, and aluminum, comprising a stationary rotating part, peculiarly assembled. The electricity would then be distributed long distances by his AC system, which he said already distributed 30 million horsepower of water power, and there were projects then going on all around the world which would double that amount. Unfortunately, there is not enough water power to satisfy the present needs, he said, and everywhere inventors and engineers are endeavoring to unlock some additional storage of energy. The formula for a long life. In his 8th decade, Tesla still expected to live a long time and reflected on life and longevity. Quite early in my life, I set about disciplining myself. planning out a program of living for what I consider the most sane and worthwhile life. Since I love my work above all things, it is only natural that I should wish to continue it until I die. I want no vacation, no surcease from my labors. If people would select a life work compatible with their temperaments, the sum total of happiness would be immeasurably increased in the world. Many are saddened and depressed by the brevity of life. What is the use of attempting to accomplish anything, they say? Life is so short. We may never live to see the completion of the task. Well, people could prolong their lives considerably if they would make the effort. Human beings do so many things that pave the way to an early grave. First of all, we eat too much, but this we have heard said often before. And we eat the wrong kinds of food and drink the wrong kinds of liquids. Most of the harm is done by overeating and under-exercising, which bring about toxic conditions in the body and make it impossible to throw off the accumulated poisons. See, that's where a little fasting comes in too. So, my regimen for the good life and my diet. Well, for one thing, I drink plenty of milk and water. Why overburden the bodies that serve us? I eat but 2 meals a day, and I avoid all acid-producing foods. Almost everyone eats too many peas and beans and other foods containing uric acid and other poisons. I partake liberally of fresh vegetables, fish, and meat sparingly, and rarely. Fish is reputed as fine brain food, but a very strong acid reaction, as it contains a great deal of phosphorus. Acidity is by far the worst enemy to fight off in old age. Potatoes are splendid and should be eaten at least once a day. They contain valuable mineral salts and are neutralizing. I believe in plenty of exercise. I walk 8 or 10 miles every day and never take a cab or other conveyances when I have the time to use leg power. I also exercise in my bath daily, for I think that this is of great importance. I take a warm bath followed by a prolonged cold shower. Boosting testosterone potentially. Don't they say take cold water dips and showers and ice baths and all those things like prolong, like they help with like longevity and help your body in general and everything. So that's interesting. So sleep. I scarcely ever sleep. I come of a long-lived family, but it is noted for its poor sleepers. I expect to match the records of my ancestors and live to be at least 100. My sleeplessness does not worry me. Sometimes I doze for an hour or so. Occasionally, however, once in a few months I may sleep for 4 or 5 hours. Then I awaken virtually charged with energy, like a battery. Nothing can stop me after such a night. I feel great strength. Do you bet he wasn't taking some melatonin or something just to put his ass to sleep once in a while? Maybe he would have came up with more inventions quicker if he got a little more sleep once in a while. Or if all his buddies weren't trying to compete. It's like, oh, I can invent more stuff than you with less sleep, and it's like this competition. Oh, I only slept for an hour. Oh, you know what? Well, I slept, for 20 minutes yesterday. So like it's like this competing competition ego bullshit with these guys. But anyway, so nothing changes with some people, eh? So he feels like he awakens. He feels great. Today at 77, as a result of a well-regulated life, sleeplessness notwithstanding, I have an excellent certificate of health. I never felt better in my life. I am energetic, strong, in full possession of all my mental facilities. In my prime, I did not possess the energy I have today. And what is more, in solving my problems, I use but a small part of the energy I possess. For I have learned how to conserve it. Because of my experience and knowledge gained through the years, my tasks are much lighter. Work smarter, not harder. Contrary to general belief, work comes easier for older people if they are in good health, because they have learned through the years of practice how to arrive at a given place by the shortest path. That's like a long, roundabout way of saying work smarter, not harder. It's true. So that's good. Yeah, good advice, Mr. Tesla. Thank you. So, developing the death ray. Are you guys ready? Are you ready for this? So, developing the death ray. Tesla had inherited a deep hatred of war from his father. Throughout his life, he sought ways to end warfare. Short of that, he thought war should be fought out between machines. His idea for a death ray began back in the 1890s, when he produced a type of lamp which, with a beam of electrons, could vaporize zirconia or diamonds. And in 1915, he talked of beaming energy from Wardenclyffe that would paralyze or kill. In World War One, British inventor Harry Grindle Matthews claimed to have invented a diabolical ray that could be used against Zeppelins. In the early 1920s, both the British and the French government showed an interest. 1924, he went to New York, where he met Hugo Gernsback and probably Tesla. However, Gernsback and Professor W. Severinghaus, a physicist from Columbia University, tried unsuccessfully to duplicate his findings. Not to be outdone, the Germans and the Soviets both claimed to have developed beams that could bring down planes. But Tesla was not convinced. See, I made a video the other day showing the airships shooting laser beams and stuff like that. So that's kind of like a thing that a lot of us think that was actually a thing. It wasn't just an imagination. But anyway, but Tesla was not convinced. In 1934, he said, "It is impossible to develop such a ray. I worked on that idea for many years before my ignorance was dispelled, and I became convinced that it could not be realized." Just because you can figure it out doesn't mean it's not possible, buddy. Anyhow, he was working on something that he said was entirely different. This new beam of mine consists of minute bullets moving at a terrific speed, and any amount of power desired can be transmitted by them. The whole plant is just a gun, but one which is incomparably superior to the present. The war clouds were gathering over Europe again, and on the 11th of July, 1934, the New York Times carried the headline on its front page, reading, "Tesla at 78, bears new death beam." Tesla said his new invention will send concentrated beams of particles through the free air of such tremendous energy that they will bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy airplanes at a distance of 250,000 miles from a defending nation's borders and will cause armies of millions to drop dead in their tracks. The death beam would operate silently at distances as far as you could see with a telescope and limited only by the curvature of the Earth. It would be invisible and leave no marks beyond the evidence of its destruction. An army of 1,000,000 men would be annihilated in a second, and even with the most powerful microscope, it would not be possible to see what had caused their deaths. It would also be the perfect defense against bombing. "The flying machine has completely demoralized the world," he wrote. "So much that in some cities, as London and Paris, people are in mortal fear of aerial bombing. The new means I have perfected afford absolute protection against this and other forms of attack." Tesla said that his death beam would make war impossible by offering every country an invisible Chinese wall, only 1,000,000 times more impenetrable. It would make every nation impregnable to attack by airplanes or large invading armies, while making every nation safe from invasion. Tesla said they could not be used as offensive weapons, as the death beam could be generated only from large stationary and immovable power plants stationed in the manner of old-time forts. Whoa, wait, say that again. Guys, did you catch that? While making every nation safe from invasion. Every nation, so every place. This is about to get something interesting. Tesla said they could not be used as offensive weapons, as the death beam could be generated only from large, stationary, immovable power plants. Okay, so the star forts. Because listen, stationed in the manner of old-time forts, the bastion forts, the star forts. Oh, this is very cool. Okay, so at various strategic distances from each country's border, because there's those star forts built all around the world. So they're like, okay, ooh, oh, this got my brain going. I don't know about you guys, but because this is one thing that's been playing in the back of my mind. I've been wondering about the star forts and the role that they play and when they were potentially built and their kind of purpose. And it's funny because someone actually brought up the idea of them having to do with like creating like force fields of some nature. So that's basically what's being explained here. So it's a movable power plant. Okay, well, interesting. They could not be moved for purposes of attack. However, he admitted that the smaller generating plants could be mounted on battleships with enough power to destroy incoming aircraft. That could be something interesting. Reestablishing the superiority of the battleship over the airplane again, submarines could also become obsolete. He said, as methods of detecting them had been perfected to the point where there was no point in submerging. Once a submarine had been located, the death beam could be employed as it would work underwater, though not as well as in the air. Elsewhere, he proclaimed that the battleship was doomed. What happened to the armored knight will also happen to the armored vessel, he said. The money spent on battleships should be directed in channels that would improve the welfare of the country. Manifestations of energy. The production of the death beam involved four new innovations of Tesla's, though he would not provide details of these until they had been submitted to the proper scientific authorities. However, he said, the first invention was an apparatus for producing rays and other manifestations of energy in free air, eliminating the high vacuum necessary at present for the production of such rays and beams. The second was a new method for producing a very great electrical force. The third was a method for amplifying this. And the fourth, he said, was a new method for producing a tremendous electrical repelling force. Again, Tesla was looking at a potential of 50 million volts, which would catapult microscopic particles of matter towards the target. He reckoned that it would cost no more than $2 million and take only 3 months to build. All of my inventions are at the service of the United States government, he said. Hint, hint. Should the government take him up on his offer, he would go to work at once and keep on going until he collapsed. However, he added, I would have to insist on one condition. You pay my rent. No, I'm kidding. I would not suffer interference from any experts. They would have to trust me. In the New York Herald, journalist Joseph Alsop described the progress Tesla was making developing his death ray. He illustrated the sort of thing that the particles will be recalling an incident that occurred often enough when he was experimenting with a cathode tube. Then, sometimes, a particle larger than an electron, but still very tiny, would break off from the cathode, pass out of the tube, and hit him. He said he could feel a sharp, stinging pain where it entered his body, and again at the place where it passed out. The particles in the beam of force ammunition which the operators of the generating machine will have to supply will travel far faster than such particles as broke off from the cathode, and they will travel in concentrations, he said. As Dr. Tesla explained it, the tremendous speed of the particle will give them their destructive dealing qualities. All but the thickest armored surfaces confronting them would be melted through an instant by the heat generated in the conclusion. Such beams or rays of particles now known to science are composed always of fragments of atoms, whereas according to Dr. Tesla, his would be of microscopic dust of suitable sort. The chief differentiation between his and the present rays would appear to be, however, that his are produced in free air instead of in a vacuum tube. The vacuum tube rays have been projected out into the air, but they travel only a few inches, and they are capable of only causing burns or slight disintegration of objects which they strike. Tesla tried to get Jack Morgan to finance the prototype of his invention, but Morgan was unconvinced. He tried to deal directly with the British, to no avail. Frustrated, he sent an elaborate technical paper including diagrams to a number of nations, including the U.S., Canada, Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia, called The New Art of Projecting Concentrated Non-Dispersive Energy Through Natural Media. The paper provided the first technical description of a charged particle beam weapon. And it was not just fantasy. Tesla had solved one of the key problems of the death ray: how to operate a vacuum chamber with one end open to the atmosphere. He achieved this by directing a high-velocity stream of air at the tip of his gun to maintain dynamic seal. This would be provided by a large Tesla turbine. Interest came from the Soviet Union, and in 1937, Tesla presented a plan to Amtorg Trading Company in New York City, which handled trade with the Soviet Union. 2 years later, in 1939, part of the prototype was tested in the USSR, and Tesla received a payment of $25,000. But by then, the Soviet Union had allied itself with Nazi Germany. While Tesla's death beam did not see the light of day in the World War II, as far as we know, during the Cold War, I'm sure there was some stuff going on that we don't know about, you know what I mean? But yeah, so during the Cold War, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union worked on charged particle beams. They worked on them, or they were fighting with them. You know, there's always more to the story than what we're told, guys, right? So you gotta question these things. So, resembling Dr. Frankenstein. Tesla made a further move into science fiction when the 1931 horror classic Frankenstein used Tesla coils to make lightning flashes. Much of the equipment used by Dr. Frankenstein bears an uncanny resemblance to the apparatus Tesla invented for his experiments. Indeed, Tesla favored the movie's producer, Carl Laemmle, as he fought patent battles with Edison when establishing Universal Pictures. Look at that. That's pretty funny. So, in 1935, one of Tesla's electrical extravaganzas was filmed by a newsreel cameraman and offered to Paramount. But they found the subject too technical. Nevertheless, Hugo Gernsback and Frank Paul continued to use Tesla's ideas in their sci-fi comics. Meanwhile, Tesla went about work on his death ray in a secret laboratory under the 59th Street Bridge. So he had a laboratory under a bridge? Like, what did they do with that? Did they seal it up? Where is it now? What happened to that? Did they destroy it? I'm curious. 59th Street, is that in New York? Oh, interesting. So, one of his other inventions of the period was a wooden bird cage, complete with bird bath. Western Union boys were dispatched with these to rescue injured pigeons from around New York Public Library, Bryant Park, and St. Patrick's Cathedral. Tainted with anti-Semitism. Tesla also had ties with a Hungarian architect named Titus de Bobula. Possibly through the Puskas brothers, he borrowed money from the inventor as early as 1900. Hey, what's going on, brother? Just been reading this book here and there, and I'm just going through it. Actually getting towards the last couple chapters, but I've already posted quite a bit of the ones that I've gone through. But anyway, so I'm talking about anti-Semitism at the moment. So there was an inventor as early as 1900. In 1908, he married the niece of Pittsburgh steel magnate Charles Schwab. De Bobula then designed and built Schwab's new mansion and borrowed money from him for a number of real estate ventures. He offered to find the backing to rebuild Wardenclyffe, but de Bobula's venture turned sour. He fell out with Schwab and became an anarchist. Back in Budapest, he joined a pro-Hitler group and wrote a paper denouncing Jewish physics, as the Nazis dubbed the new departures into relativity and quantum physics. Echoes of anti-Semitism can be found in Tesla's attacks on Einstein. Returning to the U.S., de Bobula designed a 120-foot tower for Tesla's death beam. However, his involvement with a munitions company run by a German-American brought him to the attention of the IRS and the FBI. When his apartment was searched, it was found to be full of grenades, tear gas bombs, and dynamite. Tesla was furious when de Bobula used his name in the arms deal with Paraguay. Questioned why the authorities, de Bobula denied any ties to the Communist Party or the German-American Bund, which supported Hitler. The FBI monitored his activities through World War II. Nothing was ever proved against him. However, Tesla was tainted by association. At this point in the game, based on everything that I've read so far, when I think about Tesla, it doesn't surprise me that he's been involved in any shady shit based on all the shady shit that we found out that he's done so far in history. And, the man, for a genius, he was always dipping out. He wasn't paying his rent. He was fucking shit up and just like causing problems, and he's not the golden boy that everyone thought or thinks that he was. You know what I mean? So it's funny to look at from a different perspective, like I've been saying. So, reviewing his greatest inventions. The following year, Tesla was still full of wild and abstruse pronouncements. He invited some 30 journalists to a gourmet luncheon to celebrate his 79th birthday in the private dining room of the Hotel New Yorker, where he was staying. He had been thrown out of the Hotel Pennsylvania in 1930, owing $2,000. He lost Wardenclyffe because he had to sell it to another hotel because he owed like 20, 30 grand because he didn't pay his rent for like 3 years. Like the man, for a genius, and he's always talking about scheming and all this stuff. So he can't even pay his rent. He's not paying for things that he's supposed to be. So he's getting kicked out. He's moving around all the time. So when other patrons complained of the pigeon droppings, he was obsessed with pigeons too in his later years. So while the reporters feasted at his expense, Tesla did not even touch a glass of water. However, towards the end of the meal, he went and got a small bottle of pasteurized milk, which he poured into a silver dish and heated on a small oil stove beside the table. The Hotel New Yorker then supplied a birthday cake with one candle for their honored guests. Asked what his greatest feat in the field of engineering, he said, an apparatus which by mechanical energy can be transmitted to any part of the terrestrial globe. He called this discovery telegeodynamics and admitted that it would appear almost preposterous. However, it would give the world a new means of unfailing communication, provide a new and by far the safest means for guiding ships at sea and into the port, furnish a divining rod for locating any type of ore beneath the surface of the earth, and give scientists a means of laying the bare physical conditions of the earth, and enable them to determine all the earth's physical constants. The apparatus needed to do this, he said, was simple. It consisted of a stationary part and a cylinder of fine steel floating in the air. He had said discovered a means of impressing on the floating part powerful impulses which react on the stationary part, and through the latter to transmit energy through the earth. To do this, he'd found a new amplifier for a known type of energy. The purpose was to produce impulses through the earth and then pick them up whenever needed. His second greatest invention, he said, will be considered absolutely impossible by any competent electrical engineer. It was a new method of producing direct current without a commutator, something, he said, that had been considered impossible since the days of Faraday. Just one sec, guys. Impossible since the days of Faraday. Incredible as it seems, he said, I have found a solution for this old problem. Next, he came to cosmic rays, which, he said, were produced by the force of electrostatic repulsion and consisted of powerfully charged positive particles that come to Earth from the Sun and other stars. After experimentation, he said, the Sun is charged with an electrical potential of 215 billion volts, while the electrical charge stored in the Sun amounted to around 50 billion electrostatic units. Look at that. It's a neat looking picture. It's like some super villa. Probably all runs on like free energy and everything. It's interesting to look at, though, that's for sure. It's an all electric new deluxe apartment. That was made. The picture is from 1922. So again, he dismissed the theory of relativity, describing it as a mass of error and deceptive ideas violently opposed to the teachings of great men of science and even to common sense. See, it's like, you know how there's the politicians and stuff. There's always, one that people want to. There are two sides. They're two heads of the same body, kind of thing. So it's like you have these two people like battling it out, and they're both not for the people, but they're just like there's this drama or whatever to like capture attention or whatever the case may be. It's just interesting to look at how they talk shit about each other too, and all these great inventors and scientists and what have you. So the theory. So he was saying again, he dismissed the theory of relativity, describing it as mass of error and deceptive ideas that violently oppose the teaching of great men of science and even to common sense. The theory wraps all these errors and fallacies and clothes them in a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king. Its exponents are brilliant men, but they are metaphysicists rather than scientists. Not a single one of the relativity propositions has been proved. One of Tesla's great bugbears with relativity was its prohibition of anything traveling faster than the speed of light, which upsets his theories about standing waves and the wireless transmission of energy. He was adamant that in his observations of cosmic rays, he had already discovered particles that travel faster than light. In 1899, I obtained mathematical and experimental proofs that the sun and other heavenly bodies similarly conditioned and emit rays of great energy, which consist of inconceivable small particles, animated by velocities vastly exceeding that of light. So great is the penetrative power of these rays that they can traverse thousands of miles of solid matter with but slight diminution of velocity. In passing through space, which is filled with cosmic dust, they generated a secondary radiation of constant intensity day and night, and pouring upon the earth equally from all directions. As the primary rays projected from the suns and stars can pass through distances measured in light years with great diminution of velocity, it follows that whether a secondary ray is generated near a sun or at any distance from it, however great its intensity is the same. As of yet, no one else has found particles that travel faster than light. However, neutrinos generated by the fusion reactions in the sun do have the penetrative power that Tesla mentioned. They were predicted by the Italian-born physicist Enrico Fermi in 1934, but not detected experimentally for another 20 years. Nevertheless, in 1932, Tesla said that he had harnessed the cosmic rays and caused them to operate a motive device. Cosmic rays, he said, struck the atmosphere, ionizing the air and creating charged particles, ions and electrons. These charges are captured in a condenser, which is made to discharge through the circuit of a motor, So is this basically a free energy device that he's explaining right now? It sounds like it. Circuit of orbit. He said also that he had hopes of building such a motor on a large scale. However, by 1935, he was also telling the New York Herald Tribune that someday the sun would explode. The Tesla Institute. Let me get there, guys. In 1936, the Tesla Institute was opened in Belgrade, then the capital of Yugoslavia, a fully equipped research center. It was funded by the Yugoslav government and private sources. A week of celebrations commemorating the great man's 80th birthday followed. They occurred in Belgrade on the 26th, 27th, and 28th of May in Zagreb, capital of Croatia. On the 30th of May, and in his native village of Smiljan, on the 2nd of June, and again on the 12th of July, 1936. Ooh, is this the final chapter? Hold on, let me have a look here, guys. Oh, we got 2 more chapters left. I'm starting to get tired. I don't know. How are you guys feeling? Should I keep reading? You want to read a bit more, or are you kind of? It's getting late too. I don't know what time. It's almost midnight for me here. I don't know about the rest of you guys. Let me know how you're feeling, or if you guys want to have a discussion about any of this before I continue. I'm kind of down for whatever at this point in time, but I do need a few minutes to hydrate and what have you. If you guys do have any questions or comments or anything you want to add, please. I really enjoy the engagement, and once certain things that I see, it helps me to gives me more to talk about as well, because it'll kind of like activate whatever that needs to be said. You know what I mean. So, like I said, let me know. Thank you. I appreciate you as well. I'm glad you guys are enjoying listening to this story. Talking about Tesla and getting a better look at the life and times of this so-called electric messiah. It's pretty funny, because to make him out like this messiah, but he's a man too, and he has his faults and fallacies and whatever you want to call it. But I still question a lot of things. I question all of history. You know what I mean? I even question him and what he was all about, and whether he is really as great as everyone makes him out to be, or if he's just like another puppet or figurehead in all of this. So it's definitely interesting to look at, and I've been going over this book with all of you guys, or whoever has been watching the past few days. I'm reading a few chapters here and there, and it's been interesting, even from his childhood till his schooling, all his different experiences, all the different things that's happened to this man, and it's definitely interesting. I've been enjoying it, and like I said, I question a lot of stuff, and I question him and what he actually did and what it was all about, because there's always a narrative being written for us, and we're being told how to think and what to think and how to perceive history and these different things, because the idea is that he could have given the world free energy, but it was suppressed, and that's what we're told. But I believe that it's always been around, and maybe he kind of figured it out, or he reverse engineered it. Maybe he didn't know anything. Maybe he was just like, just like the president. He's just a little puppet. He's not actually in control. It's actually other groups, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? Same goes for technology and things of that nature. So I have a lot of questions and what have you. So, but it's been very eye opening reading this book, and yeah, for sure. And more and more people are getting on board with this new information. And he did visit Egypt and studied the pyramids. And yeah, he probably studied a lot of things. He probably there's probably places that we don't know about, that he had laboratories. There's experiments that we probably don't know about. But then again, he was pretty egotistical, and he would probably want everyone to know what he was up to. So it's hard to say. I have mixed feelings about the guy, because there's like a lot of contradictory stuff too, as far as history goes. And like I said, I have a lot of questions. So, but someone was saying that the Wardenclyffe is designed just like the pyramids. Yeah, and like As far as him lighting up the World's Fairs and things like that, how do I know? How do we know that he just wasn't there to turn it on? You know what I mean? We don't know how much was actually built and what was already there. And we can kind of deduce certain things, but it's all quite interesting. So the final days. What has the future in store for this strange being, born of a breath of perishable tissue, yet immortal, with his powers fearful and divine? What magic will be wrought by him in the end? What is, more so, yes, is to be his greatest deed, his crowning achievement. Yeah, he didn't pay his bills at a hotel that he was staying at for however many years, and he owed them like $30,000. So he had to sell Wardenclyffe, and they ended up selling it, destroying it, but also it got looted, and a bunch of stuff was stolen. So like, this man could never pay his bills ever. Like, he had to go from hotel to hotel because he was just never. And he made all kinds of money, and I guess he was just kept dumping it into inventions. But he was also a gambling addict and an alcoholic, and there's all sorts of stuff that people don't talk about, right? So it's fascinating. So at 81, Tesla was honored by both the Yugoslav and the Czechoslovakian governments. He was awarded the Grand Cordon of the White Eagle, Yugoslavia's highest honor bestowed by King Peter through his regent Prince Paul, and the Czechoslovakia's Order of the White Lion. White Lion. Where was that? Yeah. These were presented at his birthday luncheon at the Hotel New Yorker. Meanwhile, he was still making his birthday announcements of new discoveries to newspapermen. Before I continue, I noticed in the comments saying his hotel was paid by the university, but according to a lot of things that I'm reading, it's saying that most of the time, like, he lost Wardenclyffe to pay for his bills, and there was other places that he owed money to. So are you suggesting that after the fact they covered his debts for him? And what university are we referring to, and what time period? Because apparently there's a lot of times that he wasn't paying his bills, or he was having issues with that. So I'm just curious where you're getting that information from, as far as the university paying for it. Like, how long were they paying for it? Where? Which university? And when? Which hotel? Because apparently he stayed at many, right? Are we talking about the one that he died at, like, at the end of his life? Are we talking about when he was super young? Like, what, you have to be more specific as far as that goes. But anyways, in 1937, he told them that he had perfected the principle of a new tube that would make it possible to smash atoms and produce cheap radium. He would give a demonstration of it in only a little time. He was expecting to put discovery forward for France's Pierre Guzman prize of 100,000 francs. It was almost like 50,000 pounds at the time. It was awarded by the Académie des Sciences to the person of whatever nation who will find the means of communicating with the star and receiving a response. Doesn't the Order of the White Lion sound like some sort of I don't know, like one of those groups like the Shriners or the Knights of Columbus or one of those things? Anyways, that's just my perception. Anyway, so the money, of course, is a trifling consideration. But for the great historical honor of being the first to achieve this miracle, I would be almost willing to give my life. I am just as sure that prize will be awarded to me as if I had already had it in my pocket. They have got to do it. It means it will be possible to convey several thousand units of horsepower to other planets, regardless of distance. This discovery of mine will be remembered when everything else I have done is covered in dust. The Guzman Prize was finally awarded to the crew of Apollo 11 in 1969 after the first moon landing. His apparatus, Tesla said, employed more than 36 of his own inventions. It is absolutely developed, he said. I wouldn't be sure that I can transmit energy at 100 miles than I am of the fact that I can transmit energy at a million miles up. It used a different kind of energy than was commonly employed, which travels through a channel of less than 1/2 of 1/1,000,000th of a centimeter. I could undertake a contract to manufacture the apparatus, he said. While he was certain that there was life on other planets, the problem with his equipment, he said, was hitting other moving planets with a needlepoint of tremendous energy. But he thought that astronomers could help solve this problem. First, they should aim this Tesla ray at the moon, where they could easily see its effects. The splash and volatilization of matter. He also imagined advanced thinkers living on other planets were experimenting in this field, mistaking Tesla energy rays for cosmic rays. Imagine the back and forth, like funny imagination. So, on the practical front, he announced a new type of tube. His experiments have been rewarded with complete success, and he produced a tube which will be hard to improve further. It is of ideal simplicity, not to subject to wear, and can be operated at any potential, however high, even 100 million volts, that can be produced. It will carry heavy currents, transform any amount of energy within practical limits, and it permits easy control and regulation of the same. I expect that this invention, when it becomes known, will be universally adopted in the preference to other forms of tubes, and that it will be the means of obtaining results undreamed of before. Among others, it will enable the production of cheap radium substitutes in any desired quantity and will be, in general, immediately more effective in the smashing of atoms and the transmutation of matter. However, this tube will not open a way to utilize atomic or subatomic energy for power purposes. It will cheapen radium so that it will be just as cheap. Well, it will get down to $1 a pound in any quantity. Tesla was annoyed that some newspaper said he would be giving a full description of his invention as birthday lunch. He could not release the information, he said, because he was bound by financial obligations involving vast sums of money. And this was not an idle boast, he insisted. It is not an experiment. I have built, demonstrated, and used it. Only a little time will pass before I can give it to the world. The New York Times, perhaps with tongue-in-cheek, went on to report that Dr. Tesla entertained his guests with colorful personal reminiscence and observations, including his opinions on dying and immortality. Where are we? Okay, so more money worries. More money, more problems, right, guys? So, although Tesla's mind was as fertile as ever, his financial situation continued to decline. When Hugo Gernsback showed him Westinghouse's latest radio set, Tesla saw immediately that they were flagrantly infringing his wireless patents. He protested, but was in no position to fight a large corporation. Unable to pay his hotel bill again. See that? Grand Gardens, unable to pay his hotel bill again. I'm telling you, they've said that repeatedly through this entire book. And maybe Westinghouse might have helped him out, but that might have been only once or twice, because honestly, this appeared to be a thing that happened regularly. So, I'm sure there's obviously some validity to that statement. So I think somewhere that we're both somewhat accurate. I'm just teasing though about but they literally have, this is what I'm reading. Unable to pay his bills again. Tesla, and he had gambling problems. Like, there's so many different things that people don't talk about. So handed over to the working model of his death beam as collateral. See, he was giving up a lot of things to keep paying things. He lost Wardenclyffe. He's giving up a working model of a death beam. Like, he's just using whatever he has at his disposal to pay for his shit. Like, it was worth, he said, $10,000. He also told Jack Morgan that the Russians were keen to buy his death beam to defend themselves against the Japanese. However, he already owed Morgan a great deal of money over his bladeless turbines, and despite filling his letters with attacks on Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal with Astor, whom Morgan hated, no money was forthcoming. Eventually, Westinghouse acknowledged Tesla's contribution to the company and paid him $125 a month as a consulting engineer. They also came to an agreement with the Hotel New Yorker, where Tesla lived rent-free for the rest of his life. Oh, there we go. So that must be what you're talking about. We just hadn't got that far in the story yet. So, let's see. I wonder if it is Yale or Columbia that helped with that. So, the Yugoslav government... Oh, so, here we go. The Yugoslav government also gave him an honorarium of $7,200 a year. This allowed him to give generous tips to those who had rendered him the slightest assistance and handouts that he could ill afford to anyone he thought was in need. Tesla gave some of his last interviews to Nazi apologist George S. Viereck. Again, he explained that he was not a believer in God in the conventional sense. Perhaps under Viereck's influence, Tesla espoused eugenics, the forced sterilization of those thought to be mentally unfit, which were then being practiced in the U.S. as well as Nazi Germany. The year 2100 will see eugenics universally established. In past ages, the law governing the survival of the fittest roughly weeded out the less desirable strains. Then man's new sense of pity began to interfere with the ruthless workings of nature. As a result, we continue to keep alive and to breed the unfit. The only method compatible with our notions of so there's no population control through natural means is kind of what he's suggesting there. I'm not sure of civilization, and the race is to prevent the breeding of the unfit by sterilization. That's pretty hardcore, and the deliberate guidance of the mating instinct. Several European countries and a number of states of the American Union sterilized the criminal and the insane. They were doing that, apparently, yeah. So this is not sufficient. The trend of opinion among eugenists, that's a weird word, is that we must make marriage more difficult. Certainly, no one who's not a desirable parent should be permitted to produce progeny. A century from now, it will no more occur to a normal person to mate with a person eugenically unfit than to marry a habitual criminal. Although at the time the environment was hardly on the agenda, Tesla told Vivek, hygiene, physical culture um, will be recognized branches of education and government. The Secretary of Hygiene and for Physical Culture will be far more important in the cabinet of the President of the United States, who holds office in the year 2035. Than the Secretary of War. The pollution of our beaches, such as exists today around New York City, will seem as unthinkable to our children and grandchildren as life without plumbing seems to us. Our water supply will be far more carefully supervised, and only a lunatic will drink unsterilized water. He looked forward to a time where science and education will be more important than war. Now it's both. Today, the most civilized countries of the world spend a maximum of their income on war and a minimum on education. The 21st century will reverse this order. It would be more glorious to fight against ignorance than to die on the field of battle. If only that were true, eh, guys? So, the discovery of a new scientific truth will be more important than the squabbles of diplomats. Even the newspapers of our own day are beginning to treat scientific discoveries and the creation of fresh, philosophical concepts as news. The newspapers of the 21st century will give a mere stick in the back pages to account of crime or political controversies, but will headline on the front page the proclamation of new scientific hypotheses. Now gaunt from his meager diet, he had clear views on the future of food. But, as gaunt as he looked, he was saying that his whole family was like centurions, so they were living, all of them were living past 100. So obviously, the way they were eating, and he was saying alcohol actually played a role as well in why they were able to live longer. So that's definitely interesting. So more people die or grow sick from polluted water than from coffee, tea, tobacco, and other stimulants. I myself eschew all stimulants. I also practically abstain from meat. I'm convinced that within a century, coffee, tea, and tobacco will no longer be in vogue. Alcohol, however, will still be used. It is not a stimulant, but a veritable elixir of life. The abolition of stimulants will not come about forcibly, and will simply be no longer fashionable to poison the system with harmful ingredients. The bodybuilder Bernard McFadden has shown how it is possible to provide palatable food based upon natural products such as milk, honey, and wheat. I believe that the food which is served today in his penny restaurants will be the basis of Epicurean meals in the smartest banquet halls of the 21st century. There will be enough wheat and wheat products to feed the entire world, including the teeming millions of China and India, now chronically on the verge of starvation. The earth is bountiful, and where her bounty fails, nitrogen drawn from the air will refertilize her womb. I developed a process for this purpose. It sounds like electroculture to me. Anyway, so in 1900 it was perfected. 14 years later, under the stress of war by German chemists. After subsisting on a diet of bread, warm milk, and what he called factor actus, Tesla gave up solid food altogether, living on thin gruel of cauliflower, leeks, cabbage, turnips, and lettuce. But he was still strong enough to make predictions. Then, in his last days, he lived on milk and honey, believing them to be the purest foods. Nevertheless, the future looked bright. Long before the next century dawns, systematic reforestation and the scientific management of all natural resources will have made an end of all devastating droughts, forest fires, and floods. The universal utilization of water power and its long distance transmission. There it is. The universal utilization of water power and its long distance transmission will supply every household with cheap power and will dispense with necessity of burning fuel. There it is, guys. Water power. This whole world is set up for hydroelectricity. Anyway, so the struggle for existence being lessened. There should be development along ideal rather than material lines. So, innumerable, where were we? So, thinking machine. Sorry, guys, I just lost my. Yeah, so what's more, the work would have been done by robots, something Tesla had been working on for nearly 40 years. At present, we suffer from the derangement of our civilization because we have not yet completely adjusted ourselves to the machine age. The solution of our problems does not lie in destroying, but in mastering the machine. Innumerable activities still performed by the human hands today will be performed by automatons. At this very moment, scientists working in the laboratories of American universities are attempting to create what have been described as a thinking machine. I anticipated this development. I actually constructed robots. Today, the robot is an accepted fact, but the principle has not been pushed far enough. In the 21st century, the robot will take the place which slave labor occupied in ancient civilization. There is no reason at all why most of this should not come to pass in less than a century, freeing mankind to pursue its higher aspirations. Alrighty. So, World War II. Tesla was growing feeble, but with the help of his nephew, he wrote a foreword to a Serbo-Croatian edition of The Future of the Common Man by then Vice President Henry Wallace. In it, he said, "Out of this war, the greatest since the beginning of history, a new world must be born." Like a new world order? Anyway, so that would justify the sacrifices offered by humanity, where there will be no humiliation of the poor by the violence of the rich, where the products of intellect, science, and art will serve society for the betterment and beautification of life, and not the individuals for achieving wealth. This new world shall be a world of free men and free nations, equal in dignity and respect. While the region of Yugoslavia, Prince Paul sought to make a treaty with the Nazis, King Peter opposed it. When he came of age at 17, Germany invaded and the king went into exile. Sava Kosanovic went with him. However, he began to favor the communist guerrilla leader Josip Broz Tito, who the British and Americans were also reluctantly backing. However, in the U.S., Kosanovic brought King Peter to Tesla's hotel. In his diary, King Peter wrote, "I visited Dr. Nikola Tesla, the world-famous Yugoslav-American scientist, in his apartment in the Hotel New Yorker. After I had greeted him, the aged scientist said, 'It is my greatest honor. I am glad you are in your youth, and I am content that you will be a great ruler. I believe I will live until you come back to a free Yugoslavia. From your father, you have received his last words. Guard Yugoslavia. I am proud to be a Serbian and a Yugoslav. Our people cannot perish. Preserve the unity of all Yugoslavs, the Serbs, the Croatians, and the Slovenes.'" The Slovenes? Yes, there we go. Two of them wept over the fate of their homeland. So, generous to the end. Although Tesla was dogged by his own financial problems, he was generous to the end. A few days before he died, he called one of his favorite messenger boys, a lad named Kerrigan, and gave him an envelope addressed to Mr. Samuel Clemens, 35 South Fifth Avenue, New York City. He told him it was to be delivered as quickly as possible. After a while, the boy returned, saying that there was no such street as South Fifth Avenue. Tesla was furious. Mr. Clemens was a very famous author who wrote under the name of Mark Twain. He told Kerrigan the address he had given was correct. So Mark Twain was using all sorts of fake names and stuff because he was probably shady too. He would, like, remember I was saying that him and Tesla were like talking about like Mark Twain wanted Tesla to build him a device so he could like swindle rich old ladies with like these health devices, and it's just like a really funny story. I just picture them like being these like drinking buddies or whatever. It was pretty funny. So where was I? So Kerrigan tried again, and we had no luck. He reported to his office manager, who quickly spotted the boy's difficulty. South Fifth Avenue had changed its name to West Broadway years before, and Mark Twain had been dead for over 30 years. The address Tesla had given him was that of his laboratory that had burnt down. Kerrigan returned to Tesla to explain his difficulties. Tesla was outraged when the boy told him that Mark Twain was dead. He was in my room here last night, Tesla insisted. He's having financial difficulties and needs my help. He sounds like he's losing it at this point. And he sent the boy to deliver the envelope again. Confused, returned to his manager, opened the envelope to see whether it contained any clue to where it should be delivered. All that was inside was a blank piece of paper and $100 in $5 bills. When Kerrigan returned the envelope to Tesla, yet again, the inventor told him that if he could not deliver the money, he should keep it. At the same time, while Tesla could not pay the $297 for his possessions that were being kept in storage, he sent a check for $500 to a Serbian church in Gary, Indiana. Tesla's biographer John J. O'Neill saw an advertisement for Tesla's possessions that were being sold off by the storage company to cover. Imagine what would be in that pile of shit. Like, you know how they do like storage wars? Imagine being the dude that imagine today you come across something like that and it's like storage wars. Like, look what I found. And he's like got all these crazy inventions and stuff. That'd be really funny. So, at the same time, yeah, he couldn't pay his bills yet again. So they were being sold off by the storage company to cover the bills, and they contacted the inventor's nephew, who paid the bill, preventing the loss of Tesla's priceless papers. But inevitably, guys, we know that they ended up in somebody's hands at some point in time. But do we know if those are the true plans or just the plans that Tesla wanted people to find? These are questions that I do have. So, the slight hint of a smile. During the latter part of 1942, Tesla became practically a recluse. Physically weak, he retired to bed and permitted no visitors. Hotel staff were not to visit his room unless he summoned them, and he refused to listen to any suggestion that they call a doctor. On the 5th of January 1943, he called the maid to his room and issued orders that he was not to be disturbed. Nothing was heard from him for 3 days. Finally, the maid decided to risk his wrath and check up on him. She entered the room in trepidation and found him dead. So he died January 5th, 1943, or shortly after. Or 3 days after, so it would have been on the 8th. Wow, okay. Slight hint of a smile on his gaunt face. Wow, so he died with a little smile on his face, a little smirky boy. So as he died alone without medical attention, the police were called. The medical examiner put the time of death as 10:30 p.m. on Thursday, January 7th, just a few hours before the maid's early morning visit. Where'd I go? Yeah, so he didn't get any medical attention, died of sleep. The cause of death was given as coronary thrombosis. Does anybody know what that means? And the medical examiner noted that there were no suspicious circumstances. Why would no that's that when they say that there's no suspicious circumstances, it makes me think that there's suspicious circumstances. So agents from the FBI came to open the safe in Tesla's room, and we're getting to the juicy bits here, guys, and read his papers in case there was anything in them that might aid the war effort. Is that really all it was about? Okay. However, Hugo Gernsback, Kenneth Sweezy, Sava Kosanovic, and George Clark of RCA had already entered the apartment. So all these head guys of RCA are in his apartment. That's so weird. While Gernsback went to organize a death mass, the other three had the safe opened by a locksmith. So you have all these the life and times of an electric messiah is the name of this book. So, but these people, it's just interesting to see these different people, and they're all of RCA, and they're just picture these head dudes all standing in this guy's apartment waiting for the safe to be open, trying to. I feel like he probably it was probably empty with a note. That's why he was smiling when he was dead, because he wanted them to find it and think they were gonna find something cool, and it was his final prank in death or something silly like that. You know what I mean? Final fuck you. So where was I? The FBI said that valuable papers were taken. However, the hotel management said that Kosanovic only took 3 pictures, and Sweezy took the testimonial book created for Tesla's 75th birthday. However, Kosanovic was sure that someone had already gone through his uncle's FX. Technical papers were missing, along with a black notebook he knew that Tesla kept. It contained several hundred pages of notes, some of which were marked government. The Yugoslav ambassador, Dr. Konstantin Fotish, laid on a state funeral for Tesla at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Over 2,000 mourners were present, including other inventors. While the church was Episcopalian, the service was Orthodox and conducted in Serbian. The honorary pallbearers included Dr. Ernst Alexanderson of General Electric, who patented a high-frequency transmitter, Edwin Armstrong, the father of FM radio, Gano Dunn, president of J.G. White Engineering, who had been Tesla's assistant at his groundbreaking lecture at Columbia, and representatives from Westinghouse, Columbia University, and the Hayden Planetarium, where Tesla would often go to meditate. A number of Yugoslav ministers were there. King Peter II of Yugoslavia sent a wreath, and the chief mourner was Tesla's nephew, who was by then the president of the Eastern and Central European Planning Board, representing Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Greece. Later, he became Yugoslav ambassador to the U.S. How about that? So his nephew was it? Yeah. Scientists paid tribute to his intellect and technological achievements, and telegrams of condolence came from the Nobel Prize winners, prominent scientists, literary figures, and U.S. officials. A message from Miss Eleanor Roosevelt read, "The President and I are deeply sorry to hear of the death of Mr. Nikola Tesla. We are grateful for his contribution to science and industry and to this country." Vice President Henry Wallace paid a more personal tribute. "Nikola Tesla, Yugoslav-born, so lived his life as to make it an outstanding example of that power that makes the United States not merely an English-speaking nation, but a nation with universal appeal. In Nikola Tesla's death, the common man loses one of his best friends." Over the radio, New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia read a eulogy written by Slovene author Luis Adamic. After the service, Tesla's body was taken to Ferncliff Cemetery in Ardsley, New York, and was later cremated. So, Tesla had always been loved by popular press for his shocking experiments and outrageous pronouncements. On his death, the New York Sun wrote, "Mr. Tesla was 86 years old when he died. He died alone. He was an eccentric, whatever that means, a nonconformist, possibly. At any rate, he would leave his experiments and go for a long time to feed the silly and inconsequential pigeons in Herald Square. He delighted in taking nonsense, or was it? Granting that he was a difficult man to deal with and that sometimes his predictions would affront the ordinary human's intelligence, here still was an extraordinary man of genius." He must have been. He was seeing a glimpse into that confused and mysterious frontier which divides the known and the unknown. But today we know that Tesla was ostensibly foolish old gentleman at times, was trying with superb intelligence to find the answers. Probably we shall appreciate him better a few million years from now. More tributes came rolling in. Hugo Gernsback wrote, "We cannot know, but it may be that a long time from now, when patterns have changed, the critics will take a view of history. They will bracket Tesla with Da Vinci or with our own Mr. Franklin. One thing is for sure, the world as we run it today did not appreciate his peculiar greatness." The president of RCA, David Sarnoff, said, "Nikola Tesla's achievements in electrical science are monuments that symbolize America as a land of freedom and opportunity. His novel ideas of getting the ether in vibration put him on the frontier of wireless. Tesla's mind was a human dynamo that whirled to benefit mankind. Edwin Armstrong, who went on to sue RCA for infringing his patents, said, "Who today can read a copy of the inventions, researches, and writings of Nikola Tesla, published before the turn of the century, without being fascinated by the beauty of the experiments described and struck with admiration for Tesla's extraordinary insight into the nature of the phenomena with which he was dealing? Who now can realize the difficulties he must have had to overcome in those early days? But one can imagine the inspirational effect of the book 40 years ago on a boy about to decide to study the electrical art. Its effect was both profound and decisive." Yeah, that's what I've heard before about him going in and removing a lot of stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. People say that he had all kinds of stuff, but I feel like he was smart enough to probably hide some of that stuff. I'm sure there's some hidden designs or patents that we don't know about this man. So
It's very interesting for sure.
So, 9 months after his death, the USS Nikola Tesla, a Liberty ship vital to the Allied war effort, was launched into Baltimore. Interesting. So, the missing papers. Ooh, here we go. The papers from the safe in Tesla's room were lodged with the Office of Alien Property. This was unusual as Tesla was a U.S. citizen. The day after Tesla died, Abraham N. Spanel, the designer of floating pontoon stretchers, got in touch with the FBI agent Frederick Cornels about the Tesla papers, fearing that, via Kosanovic, they might fall into communist hands. Before he had started the International Latex Company of Dover, Delaware, who later made spacesuits, so there you go. Spanel had worked as an electrical engineer and considered that some of Tesla's unmade inventions might play a vital role in the war. He made waves in high places, contacting others in the White House and the FBI. Yeah, alien property, that's pretty funny, eh? White House and FBI. Spanel also got in touch with the young electrical engineer Blois Fitzgerald, who also had contacted Cornels. Fitzgerald had been writing to Tesla for some time. Finally, he got to meet Tesla just a few weeks before his death. But at the time, Fitzgerald was at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology working on the dissipation of energy from rapid-fire weapons. Around the same time, Tesla had complained that someone had been trying to steal his invention. His room had been entered and his papers examined, but the spies had left empty-handed, he said. Fitzgerald told Cornels that among Tesla's papers were complete plans for his death beam along with specifications and explanations of how the thing worked. There was also a working model which cost more than $10,000 to build in the safety deposit box of Tesla's at the Governor Clinton Hotel. Charles Hausler, one of Tesla's pigeon handlers, also said that Tesla kept a large box in his room near his pigeon cages. He told me to be careful not to disturb the box as it contained something that could destroy an airplane in the sky, and he had high hopes of presenting it to the world, Hausler said. The next title is Trunks Full of Alien Property. Interesting. So, according to Fitzgerald, Tesla had claimed that he had some 80 trunks in various places around the city. It was vital for the war effort that the government get their hands on the Tesla papers. He also expressed doubts about the loyalty of nephews Sava Kosanovic and Nicholas Trubajevic. There was even talk of having Kosanovic and Sweezy arrested for theft. But as the papers were now with the Office of Alien Property, this seemed unnecessary. Cornell's boss, P.E. Foxworth, assistant director of the New York FBI office, was called in to investigate. The government, he said, was vitally interested in preserving Tesla's papers. The legality of the OAP holding on to Tesla's papers was questionable. Although legal title had fallen to Kosanovic, who was a foreigner, the government agency was not permitted to seize enemy assets without a court order. Nevertheless, alien property custodian Irvin Juro got a call ordering him to impound all of Tesla's belongings as he was reputed to have invented a death ray that disintegrated enemy planes in the sky, and German agents were after it. Along with agents from Naval Intelligence, Army Intelligence, and the FBI, Juro visited the Hotel New Yorker, the Governor Clinton, the St. Regis, the Waldorf Astoria, and the storage facility where Tesla had kept the rest of his things. Papers in possession of John J. O'Neill, who was preparing a biography of Tesla, were also confiscated. These were perused by various branches of the military. Dr. John G. Trump, an electrical engineer with the National Defense Research Committee of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, was also called to analyze the Tesla papers in OAP custody. How about that? Following a 3-day investigation, Dr. Trump concluded that Tesla's thoughts and efforts during at least the past 15 years were primarily of speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, often concerned with the production and wireless transmission of power, but did not include new, sound, workable principles or methods for realizing such results. So that's the part that they omitted and kept for themselves. Like they're like, yeah, oh, we went through his stuff, but it looks like he didn't figure it out. So whatever, don't worry about it. He was just a cuckoo psycho fucker at the end of his life. So he's just full of it. So don't worry about it. Is that what they're telling us? So, however, in his report, he admits that he had not bothered to open many of the trunks. So confident was he that nothing of value would be found. Yeah, right. Are you kidding me? Knowing everything you know about this kooky guy, you gonna sit there and tell me you didn't open all the trunks? I'd be on top of. I'd be looking for every single one of those things. Come on now. So, the particle beam. Just give me a second. I just want to see how much is left in this chat. Okay, so we're getting to the end here. We're getting there. So, the particle beam. However, among the papers was still the unpublished, The New Art of Projecting Concentrated Non-Dispersive Energy Through Natural Media. This was classified top secret and distributed to naval intelligence. The National Defense Research Council, the FBI, MIT, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where the V-1 flying bomb was reverse engineered, and probably the White House. The paper described in detail the new features, including how to create a non-dispersive beam of particles. I perfected means for increasing enormously the intensity of the efforts, but was baffled in all my efforts to materially reduce dispersion and became fully convinced that this handicap could only be overcome by conveying the power through the medium of small particles projected at prodigious velocity from the transmitter. Electrostatic repulsion was the only means to this end, and the apparatus of stupendous force would have to be developed, but granted that sufficient speed and energy could be realized with a single row of minute bodies, that there would be no dispersion whatever, even at the great distance. Since the cross-section of the carriers might be reduced to almost microscopic dimensions, an immense concentration of energy, irrespective of distance, could be attained. Then there was a diagram of the open-ended vacuum, where he said, "It will be observed that in this tube I do away with the solid wall or window indispensable in all types heretofore employed, producing the high vacuum required and preventing the inrush of the air by a gaseous jet of high velocity. Evidently, to secure this result, the dynamic pressure of the jet must be at least equal to the external static pressure." The high potential generator, creating a charge of up to 100 million volts, worked on the principle of the Van de Graaff generator. With the belt replaced by a high-speed stream of ionized air, the charges would be stored in specially shaped bulbs around the top of a 100-foot tower. In the supergun itself, tungsten wire would be fed into the high vacuum firing chamber. Under the huge electrostatic forces generated, tiny droplets of metal would be sheared off and projected out into the chamber at over 400,000 feet per second. John Trump also went to the hotel Governor Clinton to examine the working model that Tesla had said he left there. Tesla told the management that the box containing a secret weapon was rigged to detonate if it was opened by an unauthorized person. Trump approached it with trepidation. All he found inside was a multi-decade resistance box of the type used for the Wheatstone Bridge resistance measurements, a common standard item to be found in every electrical laboratory before the turn of the century. Trump took no further interest. The vanishing death ray. In 1937, Tesla had claimed that he had built his death ray beam, saying, "It is not an experiment. I have built, demonstrated, and used it. Only a little time will pass before I can give it to the world." At the time, he did have 2 secret labs where journalists were not allowed, and I'm sure there's more that no one had any idea about whatsoever. But anyway, so Mr. Sitso, whose husband's father and grandfather both worked for Tesla, said that her father-in-law said Tesla had a device that could bounce a beam off the moon. There's also a story that the Debobula design was taken to Alcoa Aluminum, who said they would furnish the material required once the capital had been raised. There is, of course, a conspiracy theory to account for the missing model. When the safe in Tesla's room was opened, the locksmith was asked to change the combination inside the safe. When it was locked again, was a set of keys and Tesla's 1907 Edison medal. The new combination was given to Kosanovic and no one else. When the safe was finally shipped to Belgrade and opened some 10 years later, the medal and the keys were missing. The medal has never been found, but the keys were found in one of the numerous cases of documents that accompanied the safe in the shipment. According to the Office of Alien Property, the 2 representatives of the hotel management who were present were the credit manager and the assistant credit manager. We have already met Blois Fitzgerald in connection with Tesla, but Tesla's biographer, Mark Seifert, had also unearthed a letter from Colonel Ralph E. Doty, chief of the Washington branch of the Military Intelligence Service, dated the 22nd of January 1946, and it's addressed to the alien property custodian. And it reads, Dear Sir, this office is in receipt of a communication from headquarters. Air Technical Service Command, Wright Field, requesting that we ascertain the whereabouts of the file of the late scientist Dr. Nikola Tesla, which may contain data of great value to the above headquarters. It has been indicated that your office might have these files in custody. If this is true, we would like to request your consent for a representative of the Air Technical Service Command to review them. In the view of the extreme importance of these files to the above command, we would like to request that we be advised of any attempt by any other agency to obtain them because of the urgency of this matter. This communication will be delivered to you by a liaison officer of this type in the hope of expediting the solicited information. If the Fitzgerald and Doty at the opening of the safe were government agents, they might easily have got hold of the combination and the keys. It seems that Spanel was already under surveillance by the FBI for his pro-communist sympathies. In November 1942, he met Fitzgerald at an engineering meeting shortly before Tesla's death. At the time, Fitzgerald was an Army private at Wright Field. The FBI report later describes him as a brilliant 20-year-old scientist who spent hours with Tesla before his death. Fitzgerald had developed some sort of anti-tank gun. Spanel tried to form a partnership with Fitzgerald to sell the weapon to the Remington Arms Company, but the deal fell through when a more lucrative offer came from the Eugene Shipbuilding Company. He was fired by them in November 1943 and returned to Wright Field as a private, according to his FBI file. In 1945, he was engaged in a highly secret experimental project at Wright Field. In spite of his rank as private, Fitzgerald is actually director of this research and is working with many top young scientists on the perfection of Tesla's death ray, which in Fitzgerald's opinion is the only defense against the offensive use by another nation of the atomic bomb. The files that Colonel Doty requested did find their way to Wright Field because on the 24th of October 1947, the director of the Office of Alien Property wrote to the commanding officer of the Air Technical Service Command asking for them back. The following month, Colonel Duffy wrote back saying, These reports are now in the possession of the Electronic Subdivision and are being evaluated. So it makes you wonder how much weaponry and things have been based off of his inventions and stuff there, and how much technology could possibly be around because of stuff that he invented, or maybe reverse engineered, or something of that nature. It's definitely interesting to think about. So we're gonna read this last part, I think, for tonight. There's one more section, then it's looks like the final chapter, and I'm starting to trip over my words, so I'm going to make this the last little section to read for this evening, and then we'll finish off the last little bit for tomorrow, and whatever you've missed previously, I've been loading them onto YouTube, and my YouTube's in my link tree in my bio, if you want to see listen to the rest of this, and the discussions that came afterwards, or during. But, so I'm going to do the last little bit tomorrow, and I'm going to finish with this last little bit here. So, Belgrade bound. In 1946, Sava Kosanovic had become Yugoslavian ambassador to the U.S. after the U.S. recognized Tito's communist government. But, by the 1950s, he was still not allowed to access Tesla's effects. He made official representation and in 1952, 80 trunks that's a lot of trunks, containing Tesla's papers, equipment, and other belongings were shipped to Belgrade. 5 years later, Tesla's ashes followed. In the Tesla Museum, they were placed in a spherical urn, as this was Tesla's favorite shape. This did not stop the American scientists being interested in Tesla's papers. Regularly, individuals contacted the FBI and were thought to have made microfilm copies of everything sent to Yugoslavia. In the 1970s, it was thought that Tesla's fireballs might be a way of containing nuclear fusion. During the Cold War, both sides again investigated the possibility of making a particle beam to disable incoming nuclear missiles. Naturally, Tesla's work would have been a starting point. In 1977, Aviation Week and Space Technology published an article called Soviets Push for Beam Weapon. In it, the retired head of Air Force Intelligence, General George J. Keegan, said the Soviet Union was attempting to develop a charged particle beam at the test facility near the city of, and I really can't pronounce that, but it's Kazakhstan. The city that's from, I'm not sure. So the editor of Aviation Week, Robert Holtz, said the Soviet Union has achieved a technical breakthrough in high energy physics applications that may soon provide it with a directed energy beam weapon capable of neutralizing the entire United States ballistic missile force and checkmating this country's strategic doctrine. The race to perfect directed energy weapons is a reality. So, for me, when I look at some of this stuff, I question a lot of things, like how far technology has really had. So when they're telling us when something was invented or created, I always think that it's always been around for longer. And the idea of directed energy weapons, I feel like that's something that's been around for a very long time. And it's probably came in different packages or different ways, but it's been the same kind of things. Just like we have, think of the computers in the 60s compared to now. They all did the same things, but they were like the components have been refined and miniaturized, but they all kind of serve the same function. Anyway, so the race to perfect these weapons is a reality, but despite initial skepticism, the U.S. scientific community is now pushing for accelerated efforts in this area. So, the news got through to the White House, but President Jimmy Carter said, "We do not see any likelihood at all, based on our constant monitoring of the Soviet Union, that they have any prospective breakthrough in a new weapon system that would endanger our country." Nevertheless, under the Carter administration, work began on a major space-based laser program. Space-based laser program. That sounds weird. That's funny the way that rolls off the tongue. So, under the direction of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Alpha Chemical Laser Project began in 1978. Contracts for the Talon Gold targeting systems were awarded in 1979, and the Large Optics Demonstration Experiment started in 1980. These programs formed the basis for the Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars, announced by President Ronald Reagan. The Strategic Defense Initiative added X-ray lasers and neutral particle beams, all of which were reminiscent of Tesla's Chinese wall. While this work was going on, fresh applications were made to the FBI to release any copies of the Tesla files they had, if only to know what the Soviets may have learned about beam weapons in Belgrade. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was discovered that the Tesla site outside of Semipalatinsk, somehow I have a hard time with the pronunciation of some of these countries or these city names, and the other names too, was not working on a beam weapon at all, but rather on nuclear-powered rockets. John Pike, defense analyst of the Federation of American Scientists, said that the misidentification of this test site must rank as one of the major intelligence failures of the Cold War. So, yes, we've made it. It's been a few days. And it's the final chapter. Yeah, but I don't want to do it right now. But so, before I jump off and whatever, let's have a little discussion here. If any of you guys are interested, I may or may not be. I don't know. But anybody that's been listening I'd like to add their 2 cents or whatever that you want to say about what we've learned so far this evening, or any other random stuff that you think about Tesla or whatever the case may be. So while we're on this trip talking about this gentleman, so curious what you guys think or what you would like to add. Just let me know in the comments, or you could, if you have enough followers, you can go live. It's up to you guys. Regardless, I appreciate you guys coming on and listening and checking this out, because we're both going through this together. We're reading it together or listening, and it's interesting to get a look in this man's life and this perspective, and it's been presented to us, and it's pretty interesting. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, and like I said, anything you miss, you can always check it out on YouTube. I'm gonna start doing longer stuff. Anytime I do lives that are longer or certain videos that are longer, I'm probably gonna just present it on YouTube, and all my short form stuff just save for TikTok, because I feel like there are 2 different apps with 2 different kind of things. So TikTok's all the short stuff, and YouTube, when you're gonna watch or listen to a YouTube video that's gonna be longer, or like quite a bit longer than most things that you would normally consume in terms of media goes, I suppose. But you guys, looks like no one really wants to have a discussion about Tesla, so I'm gonna just say this last part, and then I'm gonna head out, I guess. So, posthumous recognition. I misunderstood Tesla. I think we all misunderstood Tesla. We thought he was a dreamer and a visionary. He did dream, and his dreams came true. He had visions, but they were of a real future, not an imaginary one. John Stone. It sounds like another fake name. So, I'm going to put my little bookmark in here. And that's it for this evening, guys. That was a good little run. I think we went for about 3 hours or so. Maybe even 4 hours. Shit, that was wild. It was good. It's fun, and like I said, thanks for tuning in, guys, and you have yourselves a wonderful evening, and I hope you tune in again tomorrow whenever I end up doing this, and like I said, whatever you miss, you can always catch up on, and even the early stuff from before today or after today. So, anyways, have a good night, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you very much.